Hey people, welcome back to the channel. This is a story in which Naruto is a prodigy and is very similar to his father Minato. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Leave a comment if you want to suggest fanfic. Check the description for credits and support the creator of the story. So let us begin. Chapter 19. The week after the invasion was as Naruto expected. Everyone became busy in clean-up duty. The damage to Konoha was considerable, so all the genin teams were under their sensei's supervision and working alongside civilians to rebuild and restore certain areas that were hit harder than the most. One thing that Naruto noticed was that the rookies and their senseis mostly stayed together in a close radius, most probably the sensei's way of giving them all some sort of comfort. Now that Naruto stood at the gates of Konoha, he reflected on the past week and all that happened as he about to embark on his first S-rank mission. Each day, something new and strange happened. Either way, boredom was avoided and excitement was maintained. Flashback Tuesday. All the genin teams along with their senseis were standing in the Hokage's office, waiting for their orders. Naruto found it strange that Kakashi had himself come to wake him up at 6 o'clock in the morning. He had told him to get ready and meet him at the entrance to the Hokage Tower in 15 minutes. He had disappeared after that. Since it was morning, and Naruto had figured that everyone would be resting considering what had happened yesterday, it took a few seconds for him to register Kakashi's message, and he found several disturbances. First, he had never, ever seen Kakashi this early in the morning. The man had a knack for being late to almost everything. He would always tell them to report at the training grounds around 5 or 6 in the morning, but he would keep them waiting for a grand total of 3 hours, every time. Second, Kakashi never told them to hurry anything up. In fact, the longer they took to complete a mission, the better. Mostly because he wanted to read his porn, but it also might be because of the man's lazy attitude in general. Naruto had almost believed that the man was someone who was impersonating Kakashi, until Kurama pointed out that it was impossible for a shinobi to impersonate the chakra signature of another shinobi. Naruto had reluctantly conceded to the point and had gotten dressed as usual. He proceeded to the destination via rooftops, noting grimly the amount of destruction the invading armies had caused, even though Konoha had won in the end. As the tower came into view, he was surprised to note that all the rookie teams were standing there as well, along with their senseis. As he landed before them, all the attention was turned to him. Naruto had shifted self-consciously at how all of them were looking at him, as if he was someone else entirely. Deciding to save himself the awkwardness, he greeted them. Yo. What's up? That was all that came out of his mouth. He really didn't have much to say, honestly. The first one to react was Shikamaru. What a drag. He is way too chirpy for the morning, he muttered, slumped as usual. Naruto shrugged the comment aside and looked for any sign of his teammates. There was none. Approaching Asuma, he asked, Asuma-sensei, have you seen Kakashi-sensei around? He came over to wake me up, which is kind of strange for him. Asuma took a drag of his cigarette and blew it out, saying, I did see Kakashi a while ago. Don't worry, Naruto. We are assembled due to the Hokage's orders. He has to show up. Hokage personally threatened him with his book collection if he did not. Naruto whistled in appreciation. Not every day the copy ninja with his porn book collection. He went to stand beside Choji, who was looking more cheerful than his friend. Leaning against the wall, he waited for his team. Choji pushed the bag of potato chips towards Naruto. Yo Naruto. Want some? Naruto smiled. Don't mind if I do. His friend had an unusually big heart. To Naruto's irritation, it took Kakashi 15 more minutes to arrive. And he wasn't the only one who was looking annoyed. The man had the nerve to walk towards them without a care in the world. Kurenai flashed a look of annoyance to him. Really, Kakashi? Keeping the Hokage waiting, again. Kakashi did not look ruffled in the slightest. Relax, Kurenai. We still have a full 2 minutes to report to him. Naruto looked over to his teammates. Sakura looked as if she had literally been dragged out of bed, while Sasuke looked a bit more composed. The small twitches of his eyebrow gave away his irritation, though. He looked at Naruto with an expression he couldn't fully describe, but a sense of foreboding filled his being. He did not like that. The rookie teams then entered the Hokage Tower together, scaling the stairs in awkward silence. They really just made it in time for the meeting. Gigi was sitting in his chair, looking not one bit sleepy and cranky. In fact, he looked just like when he did on regular duty days. He was, as usual, working on some paperwork. All the genin filed into one line, with their senseis standing behind them, waiting for the aged leader to speak. Hiruzen looked over to them from beneath his hat with serious eyes. He seemed to be evaluating them as his eyes passed from each genin to another. Everyone, except Sasuke, shifted uncomfortably at his stare. When his eyes landed on Naruto, Naruto just gave him a look of curiosity, silently asking the question, "What's going on?" Team 7, Team 8, Team 9 and Team 10, he addressed in his old but powerful voice, "I have called you here to address the issue at hand. As you have already seen on the way to here, Konoha has suffered many damages in various parts of the village. Therefore, we need all the shinobi available, here and out in the field, to protect and rebuild Konoha in its delicate position. Therefore, from today on, you won't be doing any missions at all. All of you will be joining the construction duty, resuming missions only when I see it fit. I have already told your senseis on what to do. Any questions?" Everyone shook their heads, so the Hokage dismissed them. As they exited the towers to go to their workplaces, the genin began chattering among themselves, now that the oppressive aura of the Hokage had been lifted. It came no surprise to Naruto that Ino was the first one to start talking. "Why is Hokage-sama giving us construction work? We don't know the first thing about it." She put her arms up. Naruto sighed and answered, "If only to shut her up. That's why we have D-rank missions, Ino. Also, we won't be working by ourselves. Our senseis will be giving us orders in a way that we can follow without getting confused. Lastly, the village needs to be rebuilt, as you can clearly see." Ino frowned and was about to say something when Shikamaru spoke with a raised eyebrow, "Oi, Naruto. You were fighting Gaara in the forest yesterday, right?" And just like that, all of the attention was shifted onto their talk. Ino asked in confusion, "Did you hit your head or something, Shikamaru?" Naruto was fighting Gaara in the stadium, not in the forest. Naruto spoke on behalf of Shikamaru. "You may not believe it because you were caught in the genjutsu, Ino, but Gaara was a part of the invasion force. For some reason, he was about to retreat with his siblings but Sasuke managed to catch up to him. I was fighting somewhere else." He deliberately avoided mentioning that he was the one who fought and defeated Gaara because frankly, he did not want to be subjected to her endless questioning. Her reputation as the gossip queen of Konoha made him wary of her. Plus, by mentioning that Sasuke was the one who fought Gaara, she would likely turn her attention onto him. As he predicted, Ino turned to a scowling Sasuke with stars in her eyes. "So you really did defeat Gaara, Sasuke-kun. I didn't have a single doubt." Naruto refrained from smirking as Ino began to pester the details out of Sasuke. Sakura jumped into the conversation as well, not liking how close Ino was being to her, Sasuke-kun. "Back off, Ino pig. Stop laying onto Sasuke-kun. And besides, what do you mean that Sasuke-kun defeated Gaara?" Now this question attracted everyone's attention. The Jonin senseis were watching carefully, ready to intervene in case dangerous information were to be leaked out. They all knew who really defeated Gaara, as they were informed by the Hokage last night when he had called them to discuss what to do today. All the Jonin had questions as to how the Jinchuriki of the sand was stopped. Jinchuriki were, after all, beings that contained immense power, and there were very few who could claim the feat of defeating one that was fully in sync with his or her Biju. The Hokage had given them a full report of what had told him when he had summoned the boy into his office yesterday at a separate time than the Jonin. After the report, heavy shock had settled upon all of the Jonin. To think that Uzumaki Naruto defeated the one-tailed Jinchuriki without resorting to his own tailed beast's power was staggering. And not only that, but he had been instrumental in stopping the snake Sannin, who was here to kill the Hokage. The quality of the information was staggering. Shocked mutters and even a few protests and denials had broken out, saying that it would be impossible to achieve two feats such as those on the same day. However, everyone had shut up when the Hokage's killing intent rose up. Hiruzen had thundered that they dare question the word of their kage. Safe to say, everyone had accepted the information with varying amounts of shock. The boy had done feats that would be impossible for almost every Jonin there was. The Hokage had then given them orders on what was to be done the next day and warned them that the information was to be strictly kept amongst themselves. Not even a whisper was to be let out, or they would be severely punished. Back to the conversation, Sakura was frowning at Ino's statement. She knew her teammates, and while she still had a huge crush on Sasuke, she did not allow that to cloud her judgment. She had seen Gaara fight, and she had seen Naruto fight. She had also seen a bit of how Sasuke fought Gaara before she was knocked unconscious by the giant claw of sand. His speed seemed to have increased very much, and he had a deadly new jutsu, his hands seemed to cackle in lightning. But she could say very confidently that Sasuke could not defeat Gaara or Naruto. When she had woken up, Sasuke had told her that he had managed to escape with her only when Naruto had arrived. So the logical conclusion should be that Naruto defeated Gaara. Ino glared at Sakura. I mean exactly what I said, forehead. Do mean to imply the Sasuke-kun did not defeat Gaara? Just as Sakura was about to reply in affirmative, Kakashi butted in, much to Naruto's relief. Alright, we're here. I'm assigning you your places now so that we don't waste time when the workers get here. We'll start by ourselves until then, so Sakura. You will help over. And like that, the conversation was avoided for the day. All the teams had dispersed to different places in the square, and as the day progressed, the entire discussion had been forgotten. Wednesday, the day before, was spent quite fruitfully with all the work they had done. Today, they were to continue where they had left off. As Naruto lifted another of the wooden planks, he was approached by Sasuke, who had his hands in his pockets, trying to look as cool as he could while being covered in dirt and grime. What's up, Sasuke? Sasuke frowned at him and simply said, we need to talk. Naruto looked confused for a moment, but when Sasuke raised an eyebrow, he immediately understood. Sasuke wanted to talk to him about why he let Gaara go. Nodding, he placed the plank in its place and turned to him. You want to have the talk now? Sasuke nodded. He had been thinking on that question for a while now. He knew that Naruto loved his village, but for him to show such sympathy to his enemy was rare, to the point that Sasuke had never seen before. Naruto turned and walked to where Kakashi was doing his own work. Seeing his student approach him, Kakashi paused, raising an eyebrow in silent question. Naruto said, me and Sasuke are taking a break. There's something we need to talk about. Kakashi shook his head. You can't just leave in the middle of work like this, Naruto. The village needs to be rebuilt as soon as possible, so it's for the best if you and Sasuke save your talk aside for later. Naruto just gave him a deadpan and created two shadow clones. Pointing towards them, he said, these two will substitute for us. I hope that's not a problem now. Please excuse us. He didn't give Kakashi any time to reply, nor did he give Sasuke any time to brace himself. He just grabbed Sasuke and flashed away, leaving Kakashi blinking stupidly at their abrupt departure. The two clones took Naruto and Sasuke's place and resumed the physical labor. Kakashi just had one thought. It must be pretty serious if they had to go like that. Naruto and Sasuke appeared right on top of the Yondaim's head. Sasuke almost staggered and fell right over the spike if Naruto hadn't caught him in time. He turned around to tear into the blonde, but surprisingly, no one was there. He turned further to see that C was standing on the edge of the spike, looking over the bustling village. It's kind of beautiful, isn't it? Naruto's tone was soft, and Sasuke could not help but detect that there was a hint of longingness. Before he could think about it further, Naruto continued. The village is like a whole family, taking care of each other. The Hokage is like the head of the family, ensuring that there are no disputes. It must be nice, being a part of that family. Sasuke only looked at his teammate in confusion. Naruto's tone indicated that he was detached from the village, something that Sasuke never sensed from the blonde. Sure, he acted quite aloof and indifferent if only to piss people off, but from the day they had introduced themselves to Kakashi, Sasuke had only seen a strong determination in his eyes. Determination to make his dreams come true. Naruto had made it his ultimate mission to become the Hokage of Konoha, but there was something that Sasuke was missing over here. He said something else besides wanting to become Hokage, to make others acknowledge him. That was something that triggered another memory for Sasuke. The word, acknowledge, made him remember his fight with Gaara. Gaara had repeatedly proclaimed that by killing others, he would prove his existence. Wasn't proving your existence the same thing as making others acknowledge you? Sasuke was getting pieces of something, but still lacked the material to make out what that something was. Where are you going with this? Naruto turned to him with a smile. You still don't see it. Sasuke frowned, trying to see where Naruto was leading him but came up with nothing. Naruto chuckled. This is part of the answer to your question, Sasuke. Gaara and I, you could say we are almost like brothers. Sasuke's head whipped up at that. He then suddenly remembered his thoughts during Naruto's fight with Gaara. Gaara's chakra was crushingly malicious, and Sasuke remembering that he had felt a similar chakra of Naruto during their fight with Haku. Is it your chakra? Naruto's eyes showed confusion. My chakra. Sasuke elaborated. When I was fighting Gaara, his chakra was full of malice, killing. I had sensed a similar chakra from you back in Wave. Is that why you say you are like brothers? Naruto chewed on his lips as he thought of an answer. That is part of why I said that. The reason why I let them go, is because Gaara reminded me of myself. Sasuke's eyes went wide at that. He had a hard time imagining the usually cheerful but aloof blonde acting like Gaara. There was no way Naruto could be anything like Gaara. Unknowing of Sasuke's thoughts, Naruto continued, he and I share a great burden, and because of that burden, we both have lived our lives as if we were separate from our villages, not a part of them. I've felt the same loneliness and sadness in my life. Gaara thought that you can only become truly strong if you fight for yourself, but that's not true. Sasuke had a hard time on what to think. Naruto spared Gaara because he was able to identify the burden he had. But what burden could he be talking about? What burden are you talking about? And how can you not become strong if you are fighting for yourself? Naruto debated on whether to tell Sasuke or not, but decided to tell him in the end. He might not trust the guy completely, but it was better to tell him now instead of him accidentally discovering it in the future. Are you sure it is wise to tell him, Naruto? Naruto mentally nodded. I'm sure. Verbally, he said, I'll answer your question in reverse, Sasuke. The only way you can truly become strong is if you wish to protect someone you treasure. Sasuke frowned and asked, and what about the first question? Taking a deep breath, he calmed himself. He never thought that the first person he would be telling about Kurama would be Sasuke. What I'm about to tell you is still an S-rank secret, with only the Hokage allowed to speak about it, never mind that almost every adult knows it anyway. Don't tell this to anyone. This is my secret, understand? Naruto pinned him with his cold, arctic stare. Sasuke was a bit surprised at how serious the blonde was being, but understood. S-rank secrets were no joke at all. As you may recall, 13 years, the Yondaime supposedly killed, here he made air quotes as to mock the point, the Kyuubi at the cost of his life. What about it? Sasuke asked impatiently. Naruto folded his arms. Biju are masses of chakra. And chakra is essentially energy. According to the law of conservation of energy, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, but only transformed from one form to another. Sasuke's sharp mind linked the facts together. Which means that, Biju can't be killed. Naruto nodded. So if the Kyuubi wasn't killed, where is it? Naruto pursed his lips and replied, inside me, sealed away. Sasuke's eyes widened at the revelation. No wonder Naruto was so strong, he thought with bitter jealousy coursing through him again. Why was he chosen to be entrusted such power and not him? It would be foolish of me to assume that your Kyuubi, since a sealing scroll doesn't become a kunai when a kunai is sealed inside it, Sasuke said slowly, after getting his thoughts in order, and reining in his jealousy. Naruto nodded with a smile, happy that Sasuke hadn't immediately jumped to a conclusion. Then is it the Kyuubi that makes you so strong? Naruto frowned, not liking the insult at all, however unintentional that was. As a matter of fact, no. I worked hard to reach where I am now, Sasuke. Also, you remember the feel of Gaara's chakra when you fought him, right? Then you should have no problem in imagining the reactions of villagers if Gaara would have been in the village. Sasuke slowly nodded, thinking it over. Naruto had access to such power, but aside from Wave, he never once used it. He then remembered the reactions of villagers when they looked at Naruto when he was small. The task of carrying such burden had made him hated by the villagers. Is that why you said that Gaara was like you? The Yondaime was arguably the greatest seal master of his time, so there was no doubt that the seal he created to hold the Kyuubi would be strong. Gaara on the other hand, his seal was shoddy work, and wasn't able to completely take away the influence of his Biju. Admirably though, he was able to hold onto himself, but not without some damage. After I beat him, I told him that there wasn't any reason to not have friends. I had some people that were close to me, but not Gaara. By letting him go, I gave him another chance at making a better life for himself. I do hope he is better off now though. As Naruto gazed off into the distance, Sasuke found that there was much more to Naruto than what met the eye. He had a lot to think about when he got home, namely if he was choosing the right way and becoming strong to kill Itachi. Oh, and I would like my kunai back, if you please. I found out yesterday that I had one kunai missing. I still have to give the next order for them. His voice snapped Sasuke out of his thoughts, and he had the decency to look a bit sheepish at the slightly amused look Naruto was sending. It's really not that hard to guess why you want it, you know. Sasuke mumbled with a bit of red in his cheeks, I was just a bit curious. Is it because of those kunai that you are so fast? Naruto smirked, that's not to say that I neglected my raw speed. But you really should give it back. You can, in no way, decipher its secrets. Sasuke recovered and gave a challenging look, really? Naruto just deadpanned, yes, really. You really think you can decipher its function by studying just looking at 5 kanji? You need to be a seal master to even begin to understand the formula. Even I had to put 3 months worth of fuinjutsu into creating the formula on the kunai. Sasuke mentally raged, but that just lasted for a second. He sighed and said, I'll get it back to you by tomorrow. Naruto smiled and stepped closer, excellent. Now that we have finished our talk, let's get back. Kakashi must be fuming in jealousy at how long we are taking a break. Sasuke noticed Naruto's hand going for his shoulder. He only had a moment to prepare when they were suddenly standing back at their working place, facing a surprised Kakashi. He snapped his book shut and asked, so, you done wasting time? Naruto just shook his head and said, I made sure we had replacements. And don't you take the high road. You were reading that book all the while we were gone. So that day was interesting as well. Sasuke returned his kunai the first thing in the next morning. The next day was probably the best day of the week. On the same evening, Council Chamber Hiruzen eyed the Shinobi Council with a sharp and critical eye, as if assessing them. The Shinobi Council consisted of all the Shinobi clan heads in Konoha, both major and minor. Some notable heads were Inuzuka Sume, Nara Shikaku, Akamichi Chusa, Yamanaka Inoichi, Hyuga Hiyashi and Aburame Shibi. There were some empty seats as well, such as the Hitaki, the Uzumaki and the Namikaze. It was understandable why the Hitaki seat was empty, as Kakashi chose to remain a physically active shinobi rather than becoming a politician. The reason why the Uzumaki and the Namikaze seats were empty was too sad and depressing to delve in. But enough of that. He hadn't called this meeting to reminisce about the past. No, this meeting was called so he could discuss a report of who should be promoted. Now, this may seem a bit of an inappropriate time for such a matter, but he felt that he should address this matter as soon as possible. It was time for him to choose a successor for him, but the problem was that the successor was absent from the village and as such, won't be able to make a logical decision as to who should be promoted. He fingered the notepad before him absently. It contained what he wrote down about everyone he saw fight, and in the event that he was killed, it was his last and final decision as Hokage. He had written down his choices of promotion on the notepad, along with the reasons. He eyed the elders standing on the side. Homura, Kaharu and Danzo were his old comrades, but after years of playing politics, they had become too jaded, too much stuck to the old ways. Homura and Kaharu he could handle, but it was Danzo he was concerned very much about. His old friend might seem like an old man, along with the other two, but Hiruzen was no fool. Even if he had no proof, he knew without a doubt that Danzo had been involved in multiple activities that he had no knowledge of. And there was no doubt that his old friends would protest against what he was about to do, but he would do it no matter what. Chusa was the first to open the meeting. Hokage-sama, may I inquire as to why this meeting has been called? Hiruzen nodded and said, this meeting has been called by me to discuss possible promotions for Chunin. That indeed grabbed the attention of the whole council. Even Shikaku sat up a bit straighter, and the elders looked at Hiruzen in interest. Shibi's face could not be seen because of his high collar, but he spoke just like his son. Excuse me for speaking this, Hokage-sama, but shouldn't we be concentrating more on our rebuilding efforts rather than promotions? Hiruzen nodded at him. I concede your point, Shibi-san. But there is another matter I need to address. One that is in conjunction with the promotions. You see, I am now long past my prime, so I have to choose another successor, again. But the problem is that the choice I have in mind is not present in the village for the moment. I fear that when they are chosen, they may not be able to make the logical choice for the promotions, as I am the one who took note of the fights. That seemed to satisfy Shibi, as he nodded and leant back a little in his chair. Kaharu spoke next, her voice laced with curiosity. Who do you have in mind, Hiruzen? Hiruzen flipped open his notepad. My first choice for promotion is Nara Shikamaru. This caused mutters to rise amongst the council. Shikaku was now fully awake upon hearing that the Hokage was considering promoting his son to Chunin. His teammates gave him pats on the back with a smile, as a sign of congratulations, but Shikaku waved a hand for them to stop. He had a feeling that the Hokage had more to say. Hiruzen folded his hands under his chin. First of all, I have to say that your son demonstrated excellent strategy against his opponent, Shikaku. He was very methodical and tactical in his approach, and he was able to keep a cool head in front of a seemingly superior opponent. Also, reports of the missions he has done with his team prior to the exams state his capability in leading a team. Shikaku narrowed his eyes. I sense a, but, coming, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen nodded, but even with intellect of such caliber, he lacks some of the necessary qualities to become a Chunin. The foremost that I would like to address is that he seems to lack motivation. The fact that he only fought because Naruto sent him into the arena shows his unwillingness to fight. If he lacks the will to be a Chunin, then I feel he shouldn't receive the rank until he is ready. Homura added his own point. While what you are saying is true, Hokage-sama, sometimes unwilling, but potential candidates such as Shikamaru just need a push. Perhaps the responsibility that comes from being a Chunin might improve his work ethics. Hiruzen thought about it a bit and said, that is true. I also point out that he needs to pull his physical skills up to par in case he finds himself against an opponent he cannot outthink. Only having intellect without having the necessary means to use it is meaningless. However, I put my faith in him that he will strive to improve in order to match the responsibilities that come with the position. Now, I would like to hear the council's opinion. Those who feel that Nara Shikamaru should be promoted, raise their hands. Almost all of the clan heads raised their hands. Both the elders also raised their hands, but Hiruzen was not surprised to see Danzo not in favor of the Nara's promotion. Hiruzen nodded and noted it down. Then it is decided that Nara Shikamaru would be promoted to Chunin. Moving on to the next choice, Uzumaki Naruto. He carefully gauged the faces of everyone in the room. The shinobi clan head's eyes had widened in surprise, but he was pleased to note that there wasn't any hate or negative feeling he was used to see whenever Naruto's name was mentioned. The elders, on the other hand, were simply gaping at him, with the exception of Danzo, who had not reacted at all. Before they could speak, Hiruzen continued. My next choice for promotion is Uzumaki Naruto, but that is not all. I have, after careful thought, considered this. I am nominating Uzumaki Naruto for the position of Jonin. Hiruzen was not surprised at all when gasps of shock and disbelief sounded in the room. In fact, he was willing to bet that if the civilian council had remained, they would have been shouting already. He raised his hand to stop the mutters, lowering it only when the silence had returned. Kaharu was the first to speak. Hokage-sama, you surely can't be serious. It was as if she didn't want to believe that the demon container was even being considered for such a position. Hiruzen glared at her. I am not in the mood for jokes, Kaharu. Turning to the council, he spoke. Before you all start to speak, let me enlighten you as to what happened on the day of the invasion. He first started by telling them how he fought Neji. He highlighted Naruto's use of taijutsu against the prodigy of the Hyuga, but he pointed it out that Naruto had successfully kept Neji on his toes, even landing damaging hits. Hiyashi didn't react for he had already seen this, but the minuscule twitch under his left eye betrayed his irritation of being reminded of the Hyuga clan's defeat against the Namikaze heir. He carefully, orally replayed the fight, saying that Naruto capitalized on Neji's weakness of not being able to see his chakra network, of lack of it. His in-battle intellect was made profoundly clear when Naruto managed to penetrate the supposedly ultimate defense of the Hyuga. Hiruzen also pointed out Naruto's clever use of misdirection as he deceived Neji into attacking a clone, then getting attacked and ultimately, incapacitated. He then spoke on Naruto's fight with Gaara. By the day of the finals, everyone knew of Gaara's control over his sand. Hiruzen spoke about how Naruto manipulated Gaara into a position that favored him. His choice of engaging in long-distance combat was sound, managing to eliminate Gaara's strengths, and he had nearly defeated Gaara, if the invasion had not taken place. Shikaku used a question with a raised eyebrow. I understand that it is quite a feat for Naruto to defeat a Jinchuriki without resorting to his own Biju chakra, Hokage-sama. It certainly does speak of Naruto's natural power and talent on the field. He certainly is more powerful than any Chunin that we have. Even most of the Jonin, but I still don't see how he can qualify for Jonin. Hiruzen smirked and then proceeded to tell them what exactly had happened during Naruto's fight with Gaara and Orochimaru. After a very lengthy account of Naruto's victories, Hiruzen just sat back with a barely noticeable smirk and watched the conversation unfold. Inoichi was the first one to break the silence, to think that he beat Neji, and nearly beat Gaara 2 times before finally defeating him, that too with Gaara at full strength and with the help of a boss summon of foxes of all beings that is the size of Gamabunta, then he helped out Hokage-sama by successfully turning the tables against Orochimaru. There was a long silence before Chusa broke it. I don't know anyone who can accomplish even half of those things. Danzo, unsurprisingly, asked a question that put Naruto in a suspicious light. Where did he get the summoning contract for foxes? He should have informed us of such a development. Hiruzen didn't even need to intervene as Homura spoke next, as if in a frenzy. Perhaps the Kyuubi was responsible for this. However, it raises a glaring concern as to how did he become so powerful to achieve such feats. Could that be the work of the Kyuubi as well? Shibi was the one who countered the argument. I don't see why you are so worried, Elder Homura. I distinctly remember a meeting long ago in which you had agreed to the suggestion of Danzo-san training Uzumaki-san. Being a formidable shinobi of his time, Uzumaki-san would have become powerful either way. Is there something that we aren't aware of? Though his tone was as polite as ever, everyone managed to grasp the meaning behind it. Shikaku, being the most intelligent of all of them, already knew why Homura was panicking as such. They were only acting like this because the greatest weapon of the village was not under their control. Kaharu asked the next question, Hokage-sama, how were you made aware of all this information? Hiruzen just answered, already knowing what she was going to say in reply, Uzumaki Naruto himself told me. In unison, both the elders frowned heavily. Then it is possible that he could have lied about this, Hokage-sama. That was as far as she got before Hiruzen's icy glare stopped her cold. Remember who you were talking to, Kaharu. In spite of your bias against Naruto, don't forget that you haven't spoken a word to him all these years, let alone get to know him. You have no right to judge him like that. I have looked after that boy for all his years until now, and I know what kind of person he is. He never had any reason to lie to me at all. Homura asked hurriedly, then you are aware how he became as strong as he is now. Hiruzen glared at Homura. Yes, I was aware and that is all you need to know about it. But we are straying from the point. Shikaku, I would like to hear what you have to say about this. Shikaku clasped his hands together and said, well, Hokage-sama, from what you have said, I can conclude this, Naruto is an extremely powerful shinobi for his age. His chakra capacity even surpasses yours, his skills in the shinobi arts are formidable as well. His taijutsu is strong enough to best a Hyuga prodigy in combat. His ninjutsu repertoire covers over 4 elemental transformations with high-level techniques, which is more than anything what our best Jonin can say. And from what you have said Hokage-sama, his fuinjutsu is easily very advanced. If he was able to master the Hiraishin no Jutsu and think up of a counter to the Edo Tensai no Jutsu by the use of a contract seal. It shows how high his battle intellect is if he was able to come up with a way to beat Orochimaru. Improvisation during battle is one of the most crucial things that a Jonin should have. And, he has a summons that can possibly rival Jiraiya-sama's. He sat in silence for a while, obviously thinking over the facts. After a few minutes, he turned over to Inoichi. Inoichi, how well do you think he can handle pressure? His friend folded his arms, from what I have heard, very impressively. Not only he defeated Gaara without panicking or losing his head, but he was able to come up with a strategy to end the Edo Tensei in the middle of fighting Orochimaru. Plus, your question really is quite irrelevant, Shikaku. Naruto has been under tremendous stress from the villagers for years, but he hasn't broken even once. In fact, he was able to shape himself into such a shinobi under such stress is proof of his mental strength. Shikaku closed his eyes and sighed. But before he could further think upon this, Kaharu exclaimed hysterically, but the Jinchuriki is still too young. She then immediately shut up when a dose of potent killing intent hit her. He has a name, Kaharu. And you would do well to remember it. Or have you forgotten just whose progeny he is? Kaharu shrank under her teammate's gaze until she reluctantly conceded, Hi, Hokage-sama. Homura took up where she left off. Hokage-sama, Naruto is still too young, and we don't know if he can be fully trusted or not. Hiashi bluntly crushed his argument. Uchiha Itachi was an Anbu captain at his age. Hatake Kakashi also became a Jonin at Naruto's age, becoming a Chunin at 6 years old. The Yondaime was a year older than Naruto when he became a Jonin. Your argument has no strength, elder. Turning to the Hokage, he said, I am in favor of your motion, Hokage-sama. I have faith that Naruto will be able to deliver quite well as a Jonin. That started off a chain of reactions that resulted in every clan head agreeing. The elders were mollified and they vehemently protested against this, but in the end, they were just that. Advisors to the Hokage. Danzo did not show outward reaction but in the inside, he was calculating. The Jinchuriki of a village should be powerful. Even though ours is, I am doubtful of his loyalties. With such power, he would be difficult to control. Hiruzen looked over to Shikaku. What about you, Shikaku? What is your decision in your capacity as the Jonin commander? Shikaku placed his hands on the table. Well, Thursday the day had begun quite interestingly. For one, Naruto had a very good night's sleep. He had dreams of Temari and him bathing in the hot springs, and this time, they really did kiss. The kiss turned out to be so hot that when Naruto had woken up, his sheets were wet. Oh man, this feels so messy and weird, he groaned as he got up from the bed. Kurama was full out laughing in his mind. Ha 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 ha. You had a wet dream about the sand vixen. Oh, I wonder what you saw. Naruto groaned. Kurama, I don't understand how you can be a pervert. That is Jiraiya's job. And why do you keep calling her vixen? Who are you kidding? You have strong feelings for her. Feelings you know you won't have for any other female. Naruto sighed. Am I to assume that vixen is your way of calling her my lifelong partner, which won't be happening like, ever? That is exactly what I'm saying. And I don't know about ever. Naruto sighed, and when he was about to take his sheet off to clean, his eyes went wide. What the hell? Almost the entire sheet is wet. Safe to say, it was an eventful morning. After he got dressed and met up with his team, he found out that he was cleaning out a whole building today. As usual, he went to work without any complaints. However, he only did it himself for 2 hours before he said, fuck it, and produced over 80 shadow clones. He turned to his team and said it with a straight face, you're way too slow. Kakashi, Sakura and Sasuke, along with the other shinobi and civilian workers in the area, only watched dumbfounded as the horde of blonde shinobi went to work. Naruto looked proudly at his clones for a moment before turning to his team with a quizzed look, what are you looking at? Sakura came up to him with disbelief and a bit of rage, you couldn't have done that earlier. Naruto pretended to think about it for a moment and then said, no, I needed to do my 2 hours of physical training before that. Plus, you really shouldn't rely on my shadow clones, Sakura. You could do with a bit of physical conditioning. Sakura could only gape as Naruto joined his clones in the building. Kakashi blinked before turning to Sasuke. He's a bit different today, isn't he? Kind of on the chirpy side. Sasuke just gave the customary Uchiha grunt and returned to working. Yesterday's talk really made him think about what he was doing. Naruto said that true strength comes only when you have something precious to protect. Gaara had claimed during his fight that pain of loneliness and hatred led to more power. And it was hard to prove him wrong, for Sasuke shared the pain with him. But the day before, Naruto had told him that protecting people or anyone you held close gave you a kind of strength like no other. He never had doubted that Naruto was incredibly strong, but fighting a tailed beast not only at full power but also beating it into the ground. That was totally crazy. When Gaara lay defeated, so did his philosophy. Sasuke had clearly seen the defeat in the redhead's eyes. In the end, both Naruto and Gaara were insanely powerful. The difference was, Naruto was happy with his life, while Gaara's was filled with nothing but hatred and insanity. Up until now, Sasuke had been following Itachi's path. He had shunned away everyone. He resented any kind of bond that formed, but now that he thought about it, was he really growing stronger, or had he been stunting his growth? The answers had deluded Sasuke all night, resulting in a restless sleep. There was so much weighing on his mind, that he was at a loss as to if the answer he would arrive at be really right or wrong. Naruto well, more like his clones had cleared almost half the rubble by noon, after which they decided to take a rest. Woo, man. That was some good workout. One of them said while grinning. Another one said on the floor, lying in spread eagle position. He groaned, "You're unbearable." Another watched the interaction with a slightly amused look. You realize that you are essentially talking to yourself, right? Before the conversation could continue, they all vanished in puffs of smoke. Naruto dropped the half-ram with a sigh. I'm starting to think I am mentally unstable. I'm calling myself unbearable. Naruto. Naruto turned to see Kakashi waving at him. We have to go to the Hokage's office. Naruto frowned. Why? The cleanup isn't done yet, so why would he be calling the teams over now? Kakashi shook his head and gave an eye smile. No, not the teams. Just you and me. Naruto slapped his hands to get rid of the dust. He shrugged. Let's go, then. He grabbed a hold of Kakashi and flashed right outside the Hokage's office. The secretary jumped and shrieked in surprise, while Naruto and Kakashi gave her bored glances. Kakashi had revived his habit of getting used to random flashes of light. He said in a bored tone, "The Hokage called for us." The receptionist nodded shakily and went in to alert the leader. The sound of footsteps saw them turning around to face Asuma and Shikamaru coming towards them. As usual, the shadow user was slouched, muttering something under his breath. Naruto smirked and leaned against the receptionist table. What's the matter, Shika? You seem quite grouchy today. Shikamaru glared at him like the devil. Don't play dumb, jackass. You know exactly what this is for. Naruto walked over to him and slung his arm around his shoulder. What's up with you? How can you not be happy with a promotion? I'm surprised you are getting promoted in the first place, considering that you forfeited your match. While the genin were chatting, Asuma walked up to Kakashi, who had pulled his book out. Yo, Kakashi. So Naruto is getting promoted as well. Looks like it, Asuma, came the bored reply. Asuma frowned at him and said, you know, you should be proud that your genin is getting promoted on the first try, Kakashi. Kakashi sighed and closed his book. I would be, Asuma, but I can only be proud when I have trained him in the first place. Asuma's frown changed to confusion and was about to say something when the secretary came back out. Kakashi-san, Asuma-san. When both the Jonin nodded, she said, Hokage-sama will see you now. Hiruzen stared impassively as the summoned shinobi walked into his office. Kakashi and Asuma went to stand aside while Naruto and Shikamaru stood right in front of the Hokage's desk. Naruto smirked as he gazed at his Jiji. The man looked positively tired, not of the invasion, but of the pile of paperwork that was high enough that it was about to topple off his desk. Hiruzen looked at both of the genin, doing a mental assessment of them as was his habit before beginning any meeting. If both of them were excited, they were doing a very good job of hiding their anticipation. Shikamaru was, as usual, looking the epitome of the Nara clan. Shoulders slumped, hands in the pockets and an expression that said, please don't bother me or I might just die. Naruto on the other hand, he looked a bit different than what he usually looked. Naruto always maintained a cool and aloof expression, an indifferent and bored air around him that was reflected in his way of speaking. However, today he looked slightly upbeat than usual. His posture was a bit straighter and he looked ready for any sort of action that might come his way. Also, he did not like the way he was smirking at his losing battle with paperwork. Nara Shikamaru, he barked in a sharp voice, and was pleased to see him stand a bit straighter. He cracked a small smile and said, Congratulations, your exemplary performance in the Chunin exams, as well as the commendable actions on your part with your other genin colleagues and senseis during the invasion, have earned you the promotion to Chunin. Here is your standard Chunin vest, wear it with pride. He got up from his chair and took the vest from beneath his desk, walking around the table. He handed the light green vest to Shikamaru, who looked at it speculatively and muttered, troublesome. But Hiruzen could see the small smile on his face and the smallest amount of smugness in his eyes. The boy was proud to be a Chunin. I have faith that you will be able to handle your responsibilities efficiently, and strive to become better for the sake of your subordinates. Shikamaru finished zipping up the front and bowed a little. Hi, Hokage-sama. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the aged Hokage. What is he playing at? Kakashi and Asuma were perplexed a bit as well. It was the procedure that when more than one Chunin qualifies from their village, they are promoted at the same time, not individually. If both Naruto and Shikamaru were going to be promoted, they would have been promoted at the same time. As such, only Shikamaru got promoted to Chunin. If Naruto wasn't getting the promotion, then why was he here? Their question was answered a moment later. Uzumaki Naruto, Hiruzen intoned, causing Naruto to raise his head a bit, for your outstanding performance in the Chunin exams. Having a major hand in failing the invasion by defeating the Sans Jinchuriki and foiling Orochimaru's plans by countering his technique and thus, saving your village, I hereby grant you the promotion to Jonin. There was a pin-drop silence in the office. Asuma's jaw had dropped open, and his cigarette had fallen on the ground. Shikamaru was also looking at the Hokage in shock. Kakashi's single visible eye had widened so much it looked as if it were about to fall out. Granted, Naruto played a major role in stopping not only the Sans invasion, but Orochimaru as well. Hell, Kakashi would be hard-pressed to beat just the Sans Jinchuriki, and Orochimaru was totally out of his league, even with his Sharingan. He was certain that there was no way Naruto won't be promoted to Chunin, but skipping it and directly becoming a Jonin. That was a lot of responsibilities for someone of his age. Hokage-sama, are you sure that Naruto is ready for the burden that comes with the position? Asuma's voice snapped Kakashi out of his thoughts. He looked over to Naruto, who had raised an eyebrows in surprise. Poor kid must have been caught totally unawares, he mused. But as he thought about it, Naruto was more than qualified for the position. All the time he spent with Naruto as a team, Naruto had shown all the qualities of a formidable ninja, both in mind and body. Not to mention, he was a leader in the making. He is better than I was at his age, he thought. During his time with Minato sensei, he had thought that he was more than ready to be a Jonin and a leader. Oh, how wrong he had been. He had been a total douchebag in those days. Hiruzen gave a nod and turned to Naruto. Naruto, do you think you are ready? Naruto snapped out of his shock and looked down in thought, carefully thinking over his answer. I always believed that I would become a Jonin one day, Hokage-sama. I never expected the day to arrive this early, though. However, if there's one thing that I have learned about life, is that it has a knack of catching you off guard. All you can do is be prepared at all times. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Hiruzen gave a nod in agreement. So what is your answer? Naruto took a deep breath and relaxed. I'll do my best, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen smiled proudly when he saw the rock-hard determination in Naruto's eyes. There was no doubt that Naruto would let him down. I'll hold you to your word, Jonin Uzumaki Naruto. He went around his table and took out a storage scroll from his drawer. He put it on the table and opened it, pushing some chakra into it. In a puff of smoke, the unsealed object was revealed to the room. A vest with much darker shade of green, like Asuma and Kakashi. Hiruzen picked it up and walked back around the table, handing it to Naruto with both hands. Congratulations. As Naruto took the vest, he was surprised to note that it was exactly his size, if not a bit bigger. He turned questioning eyes to Hiruzen, who just winked and whispered as if it was a secret. They always fit, was the cryptic comment. Naruto snorted softly and took off his half-sleeves jacket, revealing the full sleeves, high-collar black t-shirt. As he sealed it into a scroll and put it in his hip pouch, Shikamaru muttered from beside him, how in the hell are you not sweating in all that black? Naruto shrugged, in a way that looked oddly graceful. There's so much you can do when you are a master of seals, Shika. My clothes have temperature seals scribed inside of them, to keep my body cool and at optimum temperature at all times. Pretty cool, won't you say? Shikamaru groaned while the Hokage chuckled. That was terrible. Asuma murmured to Kakashi, I'd kill for something like that. Kakashi replied back, me too. Naruto finished zipping up the vest, and Hiruzen, Kakashi and Asuma barely kept their jaws from falling. If not for his height and hairstyle, no one would have been able to tell the difference between him and the Yondaime. Even the clothes looked identical. Naruto seemed to read their minds as he spoke up, pointing towards the photo frame of his father. Let me guess, I look exactly like him, don't I? Why yes, Hiruzen stuttered as Naruto walked up to the frame. The occupants of the room watched curiously, wanting to see what Naruto would do. Naruto gazed into the stone-cold eyes of his father. The same eyes that sent enemies running in the opposite direction, and the same ones that he was sure that were full of love when he was brought into this world. I'll make you proud, he whispered so softly that even a dog present in the room would have been hard-pressed to hear it. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, he turned back grinning. So, now that I'm a Jonin, I have a question for you, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi smiled. You know, you don't really have to call me sensei anymore, we're equals now, as you said. Asuma grinned and gave him a thumbs up. Same here, Naruto. Naruto bit the inside of his mouth. Alright, Kakashi it is. What burden of the Jonin position was Asuma talking about? Kakashi raised a stunned eyebrow in response. Well you see, Asuma can tell you. Asuma sputtered, being suddenly shoved into spotlight. What? I mean, well the burden is quite large. Naruto smirked and folded his hands, while Shikamaru looked on curiously. Hiruzen just put his hands behind his back and enjoyed the show. He knew that Kakashi just lazed around all day and read Ika Ika, while Asuma just played shogi with Shikamaru majority of the time while the rest of his team trained. The time that was left was spent with Kurenai. Naruto waved a hand. Never mind, I'll see it for myself. Putting a hand around Shikamaru's shoulders, he guided the shadow user to the door. Come on, Shikamaru. We've got to rub this in everyone's faces. The two dead lasts were the first to become Chunin and Jonin. Shikamaru tried to get Naruto's arm off his shoulder. Let go of me, you blonde, troublesome bastard. This is all your fault. Really? How come you're not happy at your promotion? Promotion means there is only more work that I would have to do. As the two bickered and walked away, Asuma took a deep breath of his stick and exhaled. Wow, that was a close one. Kakashi shook his head. He really gets you with his comments sometimes. Actually, he may just have hit the nail on the head, Hiruzen piped in. You two really don't look like you have a burden. Both of them turned at him, annoyed. You really can't say anything, Hokage-sama. Your burden increases each second, Kakashi said, pointing to the growing paperwork. Hiruzen grinded his teeth in frustration. Where in the 7 levels of hell is this coming from? Construction site. It was break time, and the rookies were all sitting together, eating their lunches. And chatting with each other, for once not obsessing over Sasuke. Hinata was shyly eating her lunch as well, making small conversation with Tenten beside her. Lee wasn't sitting with the rookies, opting to sit with Gai-sensei. Kiba was animatedly chatting with Choji, with Shino quietly sitting beside them and speaking in between sometimes. Sasuke sat a bit further from the group, eating slowly while in deep thought, but not completely unaware of the group's conversation. And then he unleashed a huge tornado of water out of thin air. Can you believe that? Choji vigorously nodded as he finished off the last item of his lunch. I never knew Naruto had such a high affinity for water. We don't know many things about Naruto. Why? Because Naruto hid his true strength from us all this time. However, from his performance in the Chunin exams, it is likely that Naruto is Jonin level at least, Shino pitched in. Kiba scratched his chin. For once, I agree with you. Speaking of Naruto, he has been gone for a while. Where is he? Choji spoke up in agreement. Now that I think about it, even Shikamaru has been gone for a while. Their conversation attracted others' attention. Hinata, Tenten and Sakura looked at them curiously, while Ino was more vocal in her curiosity. Yeah, where is that deadweight? He must be slacking off, leaving all the work to us. Shino pushed up his glasses. Not likely. That's because Asuma-sensei and Kakashi-sensei are absent from here as well. Ino huffed and crossed her arms. Asuma-sensei is no better sometimes. And I haven't heard any better about Kakashi-sensei from Sakura. Sakura nodded. True, Kakashi-sensei is perhaps the laziest person I have seen. But Naruto never slacks off, like ever. Anyo, Naruto-kun is very hardworking, Hinata meekly said, poking her fingers and blushing at merely the thought of the blonde. Wow, people are talking about me even though I just got promoted. The eyes of all the rookies widened when the familiar voice caught them off guard. It came from above them, so they turned to look and promptly dropped their jaws. There stood Naruto and Shikamaru, in flak jackets. Naruto had his arm around a grumbling Shikamaru. That was the first thing that everyone noticed. Why you went to get promoted? Naruto chuckled at Ino's stutter and they both dropped down in front of them, allowing the rookies to get a better look at the two of them. Shikamaru now wore a light green vest over his clothes, a mark of his new rank as a chunin. However, what perplexed them was that Naruto was wearing a similar vest, but instead of light green, it was a darker shade. Sakura smiled at them. So you are now a chunin, huh Naruto? Naruto looked like he was barely keeping from grinning full out. Not exactly. Hokage-sama saw fit to promote me straight to Jonin. Huh. That was the exclamation that came from Ino, Sakura and Kiba. Shikamaru scowled and shrugged Naruto's arm off, walking to join a gaping Choji. As always, Shino was unperturbed. Hinata blushed a darker shade of red upon seeing how good Naruto looked in the jacket. You got promoted straight to Jonin. Is that even possible? No fair. Of course, Naruto patiently answered the questions, and accepted the congratulations. Apparently, Shikamaru's promotion was not that interesting as Naruto's. He looked over to Sasuke, who was carefully looking at him. Sasuke felt a twinge of jealousy course through him when he saw that Naruto had been promoted straight to Jonin, but nothing more than that. Rational thought took over and he realized that Naruto only got what he deserved. Naruto deserved more than Chunin, and Sasuke didn't know whether to feel happy for his friend, or disgusted with himself for being so weak. Congratulations, he reluctantly said, not meeting Naruto's smirking face. You may be strong now Naruto, but don't think you'll remain the strongest. I'll be damned if I let you get ahead of me anymore. I heard you beat Gaara, Naruto. Neji didn't stand a chance in the first place, did he? Tenten asked with a sad smile. Naruto mirrored her expression. No, he didn't. Naruto turned to Sakura, who just smiled and gave him a warm hug. Because Naruto was 5 inches taller than her, his chin rested on her head. I'm happy for you, Naruto, she said softly. She knew Naruto would go far. All she could do for him is support him. Naruto returned the hug with a smile. I'm so glad that you do. Naruto released the hug and looked towards Hinata, who froze at the gentle smile on his face. Naruto mentally chuckled. He wasn't stupid, he knew Hinata had a huge crush on him since the beginning of Academy. He only made the connection from their interactions that Hinata liked him recently, after he first kissed Temari. Sorry Hinata, that I could not return your feelings. My heart belongs to Temari now. You deserve someone who will understand and return your feelings. Someone better than me. He walked over to Hinata, stopping right in front of her. He knew that if he grabbed her in a hug as well, she might very well faint. Hinata, he smiled, you look a bit under the heat. Are you well? Hinata only turned redder. Why yes, Naruto-kun. See congratulations on your P promotion. Naruto chuckled. She was just too easy to embarrass, something he might have to break her out of. He then noticed Ino sauntering up to him, squeezing his arm. So, Naruto. Now that you have become a Jonin, what will you do? Naruto rose an eyebrow. This wasn't how Ino usually behaved with him, invading his personal space. He rather preferred Temari's touch rather than Ino's. It's better that you stick to Sasuke, Ino, he gently removed her arm. Ino pouted, you're no fun at all. Then suddenly, she narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing him. What's wrong? His words were met with silence as she continued studying his face intensely. Several seconds later, she finally spoke in a murmur, you really do look like him. He was not expecting that. What? The Yondaime Hokage, she emphasized. Shikamaru yawned from behind her, of course he would, you troublesome blonde. They are father and son. Ino's eyebrow twitched as she slowly turned around. What the hell, Shikamaru? Alright everyone, break's over. Get back to work. Naruto announced. He was perplexed when he saw everyone looking at him oddly. What? Kiba pointed a finger at him. Don't go ordering us, Tem. Naruto tsked and shook his finger side to side, as if addressing a child. Be careful how you speak, Kiba. As your superior, you have no choice but to follow my orders. Kiba sputtered angrily, but reluctantly got up from his spot along with everyone. Shikamaru walked up to Naruto with a smirk. Should you really be doing that, right after you've been promoted? Naruto gave him a puzzled look as he walked over to a pile of rubble himself. What are you talking about? I'm simply doing my duty as a Jonin of this village. You get to work as well, Shika. Shikamaru scoffed, but turned around and headed to work as well. Good thing he's working as well, or I would have socked him in the jaw, he muttered. Flashback and the next 4 days passed interestingly. News of his promotion to Jonin seemed to have spread overnight, and the next morning when he reported for work, every person that he met was congratulating him. The most annoying thing about it was that they addressed him as Namikaze-sama, or Uzumaki-sama, once he corrected them. His natural smile had become totally forced after he was congratulated by the 20th person in the same manner. Eventually, he just used Shunshin to reach his destination, but even their people were present just to congratulate him. It eventually became so annoying that he had to excuse himself to the Hokage's office. Man, if this is what celebrities have to deal with, I feel sorry for them, Naruto muttered as he sat in front of Hiruzen. The old man simply chuckled as he continued doing the paperwork in front of him. For once, he enjoyed doing the verbose bullshit. Naruto being the source of amusement might have been a factor. Better get used to it, for in the future, things will only grow, Hiruzen countered while signing another form. Naruto gave a sigh of frustration. Right now, I want to put all my efforts into rebuilding the village. It's not helping if the people start talking to my shadow clones as well. Hiruzen lifted his face to look at the blonde. Intense frustration was radiating from him. His muscles were all tight, shoulders tensed up. The boy looked like if someone congratulated him right now, he would probably coil up like a spring with tension. Then perhaps you would like a diversion. Naruto rose an eyebrow. I could use a diversion. Hiruzen got up from his chair and walked towards Minato's photo frame. Naruto watched curiously as Hiruzen sped through hand signs and pressed his hand on the frame. A click sounded and the frame opened up into some sort of safe. After pressing some keys, the safe opened up and Hiruzen pulled out a scroll. He closed the frame and blew air on the scroll to get rid of the dust. This is something that the Yondaime entrusted me with. I believe it belongs to you, he said as he passed it on to Naruto. Naruto recognized the blood seal right away. Cutting his thumb, he swiped it across the seal. He expected it to be a storage seal, but instead of an object, writing became visible. Those look like instructions to reach certain places. Naruto hummed in agreement as he studied the coordinates. As he studied them some more, making numerous calculations in his head, pieces of a puzzle started to come together. They were written in a way that no ordinary shinobi could crack. Only someone armed with the knowledge of the sealing arts could solve the puzzle to these 9 coordinates in total, each in a specific location and direction in relation to the village. He abruptly stood up. I'll take my leave, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen watched Naruto leave with a pensive look. Even he did not know what was on that scroll. He resumed his paperwork. Perhaps Naruto may see it fit to tell him. XXXXXXX Naruto sat down just outside the village gates, shaking his head at how late the man was. He looked over to the gate guards, who were animatedly whispering to each other, not so subtly pointing at him. He scoffed. He had become the talk of the village in such a short time. Nothing new, but it was better than the glares and frowns of the village. He sighed. He never knew Jiraiya had it in him to be late. Considering he was the one who approached him for this mission. Flashback. Yesterday he had just returned from his investigation of the coordinates on the scroll. He flashed directly back into his apartment, and damn near killed the intruder standing before me. Oi, it's me. Naruto stopped slashing the kunai, arrow senin. Jiraiya groaned, what will it take you to call me by my proper name? Naruto shrugged and put his kunai away. Serious situations, I guess. Besides, I don't see what's wrong with having an affectionate term to call my godfather. Jiraiya snorted as he sat back down on the couch. Affectionate, my ass. Naruto removed his shoes and went for some water. Anyways, would you care to explain why you broke the security seals to my apartment? You really ought to improve up on that amateur job. I know you are capable of doing better. Naruto huffed. Those seals are meant to stop normal shinobi and civilians, not a seal master like you. And you haven't answered my question. Jiraiya suddenly grinned. Brat, you made Jonin on your first try into the Chunin exams. I'm damn proud of you. I heard the tale from Sarutobi-sensei. Defeating a Jinchuriki all by yourself and then sending my old teammate running with his tail between his legs right after defeating the said Jinchuriki. I'm so proud of you, and your parents would be too. Naruto smiled at the enthusiastic man. I'm sure they are. Now why are you here? At once, Jiraiya's expression turned serious. I've got a mission of utmost importance, and I want you to come with me. Naruto sat down across from his godfather. What's the mission? To find the future Hokage of the village and bring her back. Naruto did not say anything immediately. He thought over it for a few seconds. A female Hokage. Out of the village. There was only one female who came to Naruto's mind as he thought of the circumstances. Are we, by any chance, going to retrieve Senju Tsunade? Jiraiya seemed taken aback. Why yeah, but how did you know who we were to retrieve? Naruto shrugged. Come on, it's really not that hard to figure out. A female candidate, absent from the village and strong enough to be considered for the position of the Hokage. There is only one Konoha Kunoichi that fits that description, and it's Senju Tsunade. Jiraiya shook his head. You really know your facts, don't you? Most of your generation doesn't even know about us. Naruto rubbed his neck sheepishly and chuckled. I like reading is all. Then he turned serious and asked, even if I agree to come with you, what's in it for me? I'll teach you a new jutsu, a rank, some really good stuff. Naruto wasn't impressed. Is that all? Just one. Brat, this jutsu is really not your average jutsu. But just because I'm such a generous man, I'll throw in one or two more for you. You good with that? Well, I guess I can't say no to a Sanin. When do we leave? Tomorrow, 1 in the afternoon. Oh, and before I forget, we have to talk about one more thing on this mission, Jiraiya grinned. What's that? But the man was already gone. Naruto shook his head. He had better get some rest for tomorrow's mission. Flashback end. Wake up, brat. Naruto slowly opened his eyes to see Jiraiya standing in front of him, an impatient look on his face. This is no time for sleeping. Naruto snorted loudly and got up. You're the one to talk. I've been here since 1. It's 2 now, you're late. Jiraiya folded his hands defensively. I was collecting some very important, last-minute information. For your book, Naruto mumbled as he began walking. Hey, watch it. And it's a wonder how you managed to stretch your last minute into an hour, Naruto continued, neatly dodging the blow to his head. Chapter 20. They had been walking for over 2 hours, with one short break in between. Nothing had been out of the ordinary, and shockingly, there had been periods of silence where neither of them would say anything, opting to enjoy the silence. Everything was good. Until Naruto finally decided that he should do something productive to pass his time. Hey, Ero Sennin, he called, gaining the other man's irritated attention. Without waiting for him to speak, he continued, do you know the reason why we are looking for Tsunade? Jiraiya gave him a confused look. I thought you knew about her being the new Hokage. Or have you forgotten? Naruto scoffed. I have a photographic memory. I forget nothing. In a more serious voice he continued, but it's not about that. I'm asking whether you know why she abandoned the village. Jiraiya flinched at the bluntness of the statement. As much as he wanted to correct Naruto, there was nothing he could say to refute the statement. He knew about Tsunade's losses in the last war, and why she chose to leave the village, but Naruto's words carried a harsh sense of truth to them. I do, but it's not my place to tell, he replied. Naruto frowned, but said, fair enough. If he did not want to tell, it was fine. He could learn it later on his own. But there was something he needed to know. Is she a missing nin? Jiraiya almost missed his step at the question, turning to glare at the blonde. What? Naruto was not at all perturbed by Jiraiya's sudden anger. He reiterated, I asked if she was a missing nin. Jiraiya was indignant, do you even realize what you are saying? She is related to the first 2 Hokages by blood and the student of the third, not to mention one of the legendary Sannin, who by the way, were granted traveling rights by the daimyo of Hai no Kuni himself. Naruto adjusted the strap of his backpack a little. This was the first time he was wearing one, I know that, trust me. The books are full about the feats of you three. Tsunade's legendary prowess as a medic is known throughout the world, but answer me this. She has not stepped a foot in the village for the last 10 years, and by extension, not performed a single mission for it. Once I asked Gigi that why was it that you were allowed to spend so much time outside the village. He told me that you were only allowed to do so for you had a spy network to maintain, right? Jiraiya frowned, but was still confused as to where Naruto was leading him but nodded nonetheless. Which means that you are only allowed to travel as long as you keep doing missions for the village. If we go by that context, Tsunade has been abusing her Sannin traveling rights. Not only has she been out of contact and sight of the village, but she hasn't done a single mission for Konoha for quite an extended period of time. Not unlike a missing nin, won't you say? Jiraiya had narrowed his eyes at the end of Naruto's question. Naruto's words felt like ice-cold water rushing down his back. Everything he had said had been brutally correct. But it was his teammate they were talking about. And he would be damned if he let anyone talk about her this way without knowing what she went through. Watch your mouth, brat. You don't know what she has been through. Jiraiya's tone held warning, and Naruto took that as his cue to drop the topic. It was obvious as sunlight that Jiraiya deeply cared for Tsunade if he was defending her like that. But from Jiraiya's statement, he was able to learn that Tsunade went through quite a few losses, and she left the village to have some time to herself. But 10 years was way too long, and if they were retrieving her, it was quite clear for him to see that Tsunade had no real intention of coming back to the village herself. But there was something he still couldn't quite understand. Everyone had dead people, but that was no reason for them to be stuck on them for such a long time. For a seasoned shinobi like Tsunade, she should have been able to let go and carry on with her life. So why didn't she? He would have to learn for it himself. After 15 more minutes, a town came into their sight. All right, brat. Jiraiya's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. We're approaching a traveling town, so here are the rules. Since Tsunade is quite elusive of the shinobi sent for her, blending in is necessary from this point on. So remove your Jonin jacket and hit I-8. Naruto gave him a deadpan look. Oh, sure. Bright blonde hair is totally blending in. Not to mention a large, gorilla-sized man in bright red clothes and white hair longer than an average girl. Jiraiya whacked Naruto's head, causing the blonde to yelp. Don't mock the hair, brat. And I blend in very well, thank you very much. Naruto sighed as he sealed his jacket and hit I-8 into a scroll and put it in his backpack. He took out a single, black-colored sash, tying it around his head like the hit I-8. Sometimes I wonder how is it that you became a spy master. Jiraiya smirked. I have my secrets. Naruto shook his head as he took out his black and red, half-sleeves jacket as well. He always felt incomplete without one. I'm sure you do. Is this good enough? Jiraiya inspected him with a critical eye. It's passable. Naruto frowned. Why, what's wrong with this? Jiraiya smirked and pointed a finger at his godson. Oh, nothing's actually wrong. But trust me, you'll be attracting a lot of attention from the female kind with that kind of look. Naruto froze for a moment. He took a moment to properly blurt it out. Say what? Jiraiya laughed heartily as they closed in on the town. Don't worry, Gaki. It's actually a good thing. You don't get many chances to appreciate the female body. The lips, the curves. Naruto made a disgusted face as Jiraiya's expression turned into a look worthy of a super pervert. For Kami's sake, the man was making grabbing motions in the air. He did not need to be an expert to know what Jiraiya was imagining. He kicked the man in the shin. Get a hold of yourself. Jiraiya was the one who yelped this time, clutching his shin painfully and hopping on one foot. You'll pay for this, Naruto. Naruto was smirking as he continued walking ahead. I probably know more about how the female body feels up close than you do, Jiraiya. His steamy make-out session with Temari was one of his most treasured memories. XXXXXXX Naruto and Jiraiya wouldn't have been in such a mood if they knew just what was happening in Konoha. Two intruders slipped quietly into the village, undetected. They were covered with black coats with a pattern of red clouds, quietly sitting down in a tea shop. They wore wide-brimmed straw hats to cover the parts of their faces shown above the high collar of the cloaks. The shorter one of them, who was eating dango, was the first to notice. He motioned to the larger one, the three Jonin who were eyeing them. Quietly, they paid their tab and left the shop. We should leave. It appears that the Jinchuriki isn't here, a low, monotone voice said to his partner. The cloaked strangers kept walking. They were passing a lake when they both stopped. Silently, they turned to face the two newcomers, Suma and Kurenai. You two don't seem to be from the village, who are you guys? Asuma asked in a voice that meant all business. It's been a long time, Asuma-san, Kurenai-san, the shorter one commented in a rather pleasant tone of voice. So you are a shinobi of this village, Asuma commented, puffing on his cigarette. What did you come here for? The shorter of the duo lifted his straw hat slightly, revealing his eyes, both of which had a blazing Sharingan in them, which made Asuma and Kurenai go wide-eyed. No doubt about it. Asuma muttered as the shinobi removed his straw hat and unbuttoned his cloak slightly, revealing a young and handsome face with black hair, lines under his eyes, and a Konoha forehead protector with a slash through it. Uchiha Itachi. So, you're already acquainted with Itachi-san, huh? Then, I also need to introduce myself, the taller of the duo said as he removed his own straw hat, to reveal a blue-skinned man with very sharp teeth, beady eyes, and what looked like gills on his cheekbones. Hoshigaki Kisame. Nice to make your acquaintance. You're not making an acquaintances here, Asuma said with a small smirk on his face. It looks like we've got the task to take you on. Itachi-san, your home village doesn't seem to like you very much, Kisame commented. I've also heard of you, Kurenai said, staring at Kisame. Hoshigaki Kisame, formerly of Kurigakure no Sato. A renegade ninja wanted by numerous countries, including the Water Country, for assassinating a feudal lord, and sabotage, as well as various other crimes. You boys are listed as S-rank criminals in the bingo book, you know, Asuma said, the smirk disappearing. Itachi, coming back to this village after what you pulled. Asuma-san, Kurenai-san, I have no wish to kill you, Itachi said. Please do not interfere with my affairs. Can't really just walk away, Asuma said. What is your purpose here? Suddenly, Kisame grabbed his sword and swung it down with enough force to crack the ground when it hit, kicking up a lot of dust. This person is quite annoying, the shark man said, a grin on his face. Shall I kill him? It does look like we can't leave the village without a fight, Itachi said, not looking away from Asuma for a second. But don't overdo it. Your style attracts too much attention. It's settled, then, Kisame said as he lifted his sword again to rest it against his shoulder. For a few moments, there was silence as everyone just stared at each other. Then, Kisame moved with incredible speed, swinging at Asuma, who drew a pair of trench knives and blocked the swing. Asuma gritted his teeth as he struggled, the sword coming lower and lower. I'm being pushed down by just the tip of his sword. What kind of monster is he? Slowly, the sword was placed against Asuma's shoulder, which made Kisame grin. The shark man pulled the sword back, making Asuma grunt in pain when he felt something tear against his shoulder, looking to see the bandages coming off the sword's tip, revealing not a blade, but a series of downward-facing scales running along the entirety of its length. My great sword Samahata doesn't cut, it shaves. Kisame announced with a grin. Suddenly, Asuma grinned slightly, despite the pain. Kurenai, you're late. Kisami's eyes widened as it appeared as though he suddenly started sinking into the ground, but Itachi looked quite unaffected, even as roots shot up from the ground and wrapped around him, a tree forming behind him. Above the Uchiha, Kurenai came out of the tree trunk, raising a kunai. This is the end, Kurenai announced, stabbing the kunai downward. A blink was all it took, and Kurenai suddenly found that the tables had turned. All of a sudden she was the one wrapped up in roots, and before her stood Itachi, looking emotionless as usual. Genjutsu of this level have no effect on me. This is Genjutsu counter. Kurenai thought as Itachi drew a kunai. She closed her eyes and bit her own lip, drawing blood. The pain was enough to cancel the Genjutsu, and she opened her eyes in time to see Itachi coming at her. She ducked, the swipe from the kunai only managing to cut a few of her hairs, but that wasn't enough. A foot came flying at her at an intense speed, and she raised her arms to block. The kick was powerful, though, and sent her flying out over the river. Kurenai! Asuma yelled, looking in her direction, which made Kisame chuckle as he raised his sword again. Not paying attention will be the end of you. The sword came swinging down just as Asuma turned to him, but Asuma was caught off guard so easily. He leaned to the side to avoid the swipe of the large sword, and slashed Kisami's face. The aforementioned nin's eyes widened as blood trickled from a small cut that was made by Asuma, with his wind-covered blades. Itachi looked down at Kurenai with dispassionate eyes. Nicely blocked, Kurenai-san. But this is the end, for you. Itachi's eyes narrowed and glanced to the side, behind him where the owner of the said voice was standing. Kakashi glanced at Itachi's back with his Sharingan. There was no doubt at all that even if he held a blade to Itachi's back, the Sharingan wielder was anything but helpless against him. He grimly thought, fighting Itachi is no pushover. He must have gotten stronger than when he left the village. I'll have to assume a worst-case scenario in this fight. Time skip. Kakashi was barely standing as he gazed at the two missing nin. He was out of strength, breath and chakra. He had made a foolish mistake of looking into Itachi's eyes, and now he was done for. Just what the hell was that? Kakashi tried to analyze just how did Itachi possess such a strong genjutsu. His eyes certainly didn't have this ability. Itachi had called the technique Tsukuyomi. A genjutsu of his design that was somehow connected to space-time, for Itachi had tortured him for over 72 hours in there, while in reality, only a second had passed. He didn't know just how Itachi had did it, but it had clearly worked. Kakashi was out of the fight. He fell down to his hands and knees. No. I can't black out now. The reinforcements should be almost here. I'll have to stall them. Why are you two here? Itachi spoke as if he did not fight at all, or after the legacy of the Yondaime Hokage. Kakashi wasn't surprised at all, while Asuma's and Kurenai's eyes had widened. By this time, it was no secret to the whole village who that was. Asuma muttered, "You are after the Kyuubi inside Naruto, aren't you?" The silence was enough of an answer. Kakashi knew he had to stall them for a little more time. I know you aren't the only ones who are moving around. The name of your organization, it's Akatsuki, isn't it? Itachi's eyes widened imperceptibly, while Kisame had a more visible reaction. A surprised grunt escaped his throat as he stared hard at Kakashi. Kakashi mentally smirked. It was a good thing that Jiraiya-sama had told him about the organization that was after people like Naruto. Kill him, Kisame, Itachi suddenly ordered. The blue man grinned savagely, with pleasure. He raised his sword and blazed towards Kakashi, intent on chopping him into pieces. Konoha Gourikissenpuu. The kick caught Kisame right in the face, sending him skidding across the surface of the lake, back to Itachi. Kisame righted himself, and was met with an odd sight. A man in a green, spandex one-piece suit with a Jonin flak jacket. His most noticeable features were his bowl-cut hair and thick eyebrows. Kakashi sighed in relief. Guy, who are you? Guy settled into his taijutsu stance. Konoha's noble blue beast, made a guy. Kisame snorted, you should take a closer look at yourself. You look more like an odd beast. Guy didn't seem to hear him as he easily lifted Kakashi onto his shoulders and said, you too. Open your eyes, but don't look Itachi in the eyes. Asuma and Kurenai opened their eyes. Taking in the scene. Itachi closely analyzed the scene and weighed his odds. Guy was exceptionally strong, and he had ways to fight the Sharingan. Also, he must have signaled the reinforcements on his way to here. They needed to get out of here. Enough, Kisame, he softly said. When his partner looked at him in confusion, he said, we've attracted enough attention. We did not come here to start a war. We're leaving. Kisame sighed in genuine disappointment as he put away his sword, and I was just starting to get excited, but it seems we have no choice. Itachi and Kisame then disappeared. Asuma and Kurenai relaxed as Guy shifted Kakashi a bit. He turned around and said with a serious voice that he rarely used. I don't need to tell you that the return of Itachi to this village must be kept a secret from a certain someone, do I? Asuma and Kurenai nodded. We'll tell the others to keep their mouths shut around him. Guy nodded and then smiled. Good, then I will get Kakashi to the hospital. XXXXXXX Naruto sighed in mild irritation as he spun his kunai in his fingers almost lazily, sitting on his bed in the hotel room he and Jiraiya had rented for the night. This was only supposed to be a small stop in the town until Jiraiya had spotted a pretty young woman who had winked at him. Almost immediately, Jiraiya had waved him off to find a hotel room for the night while he gathered some information. Naruto snorted. He knew damn well Jiraiya was following after the woman from earlier like a lovesick puppy. And he thought that this was an urgent mission. Still, there was something that Naruto had noticed when the woman had winked at Jiraiya. First off, Jiraiya was not even that good looking. He was just an old man in his 50s. No sane young woman would so much as even look in his direction that way the woman from earlier did. Second, the woman was pretty. Pretty as in above average pretty. She wore a strapless dress that was designed to show off her well-endowed chest and long legs, along with high heels. She could have gotten any man, but she went straight for Jiraiya. She did not even glance at the other men that were standing in the lobby with them. That was another thing that rang alarm bells in his mind. Also, it looked as if that woman was dressed to entice, or seduce someone, unless she was heading out on a date, that too alone. Why would a woman dress up to entice Jiraiya? Also, Jiraiya had been correct in the regard that he would attract female attention. As soon as they had entered the town, whenever they would pass by a girl close to his age, she would blush and giggle. It was slightly confusing and scary to be honest. One girl was brave enough to even come to him and asked if he wanted to spend some time with her and her friends. He had barely kept from freaking out, and Jiraiya had just walked off somewhere, leaving him alone to deal with the girl. Thankfully, Naruto was able to gently let her down by using the classic excuse he was here to train with his master and the time for training was drawing to a close. The girl had been visibly disappointed, but had understood. Surprising him, she had whispered an address in his ear, telling that if he was free, he was allowed to come over there. And she had kissed him on the cheek before leaving. Who the hell kisses random strangers on cheeks? Before Naruto could think up on this further, the knock of a door snapped him out of his thoughts. His eyes narrowed as he sensed two large chakra signatures outside his door, one astoundingly enough, a bit bigger than his own. The other one, he sensed, was shockingly similar to his teammate, Sasuke. There was no way he was going to answer the door himself. His danger sense was ringing bells in his head. He soundlessly created a shadow clone, who began to move towards the door. His footsteps were loud enough for Naruto to cover his own as he flipped out of the window. He knew that whoever was outside wouldn't be fooled by it, but it would have to do. He doubted that they were here just to say hello. He would have flashed over to Jiraiya to get him, but that idea had a risk. First of all, if he suddenly flashed in the middle of a crowd and disappeared with a person, it would cause panic in the crowd. Yeah, not happening. Looks like I would have to give him a noticeable signal to arrive here, Naruto thought as he flipped up to the roof and headed to the window at the end of the corridor. Naruto opened the door and found himself looking up into a pair of a fully matured Sharingan. His first thought was Sasuke, but then his thought process kicked in. First, this guy was taller than him, and Sasuke was 4 inches shorter than him. Second, his hairstyle was different, and he had tear troughs under his eyes. Third, he wore a Konoha Hitai 8 which was slashed, indicating he was a missing nin. Yep, he was facing Uchiha Itachi. Shit. I never thought I would have to meet Uchiha Itachi of all people. The clone thought as he diverted his eyes from the Sharingan to Itachi's forehead. He carefully kept his face blank of any emotions. To think this boy contains the Kyuubi. Came a voice from beside Itachi, as a very distinct figure came into view. This man was taller than Jiraiya, and he had very obvious blue skin and shark-like features, such as facial markings that resembled like fish gills. He was also carrying a very large, bandaged blade. His clothing matched Itachi's a long black cloak with red clouds on it. He was also wearing a slashed Kiri Hitai 8, making him a missing nin. Unless I'm mistaken, which is a very low chance, this guy is a former member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. And what's the deal with his chakra? It's almost as big as Prime's, maybe even a bit bigger. And, they know about Kurama, so I can guess they are here for him. Naruto-kun, you're coming with us, Itachi said in a monotone as he gazed at his target. He was not expecting Naruto to look like this at all. No, he wasn't talking about how he was gazing at a literal, carbon copy of the Yondaime. He was talking about Naruto's stature. He was expecting a genin, a 12 to 13-year-old. Naruto looked like he was almost 15 and not a genin at all. Instead, Naruto's posture did not portray any fear or anxiety one might have when facing a S-rank criminal. He was smart, for he immediately averted his eyes to his forehead. The posture was straight, and very carefully guarded. Itachi might have thought he was relaxed, even, if not for the barely noticeable tensing of shoulders and the subsequent clenching of fists. Naruto stared hard at Itachi. Why? Let's go outside the room, Itachi opted to say. He watched, in silent approval, as Naruto carefully stepped out of the room, keeping him and Kisame in his sights. He came to stand in front of them, keeping his feet slightly apart, and hands at his sides. Naruto had no intention of running, for Prime should be here any moment now. His job was only to distract. So he began talking. Why do I have the honor of meeting Uchiha Itachi and a former member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist? If Itachi was shocked, he didn't show it, because he was damn good at hiding his emotions. People found blank walls easier to read instead of him. Kisame, however, grinned. A smart one, aren't you? Naruto just folded his hands across his chest and gave the shark man a dry look. I don't need to be smart in order to label you as one of the Seven Swordsmen. Your giant sword gives it away, not to mention the slashed hit I ate. Kisame turned to Itachi. Itachi-san, it would be a bother to us if this kid keeps moving around. Perhaps I should chop off his legs. Naruto didn't even look the least disturbed at the threat. In fact, I dare you to try. Kisame chuckled and slowly moved forward, clutching the handle of his sword. Your bravado is amusing, but you must be a fool if you think you can stand and win against me. Itachi watched as Kisame closed onto Naruto. Something was wrong here, he thought. Naruto looked like he won't be making a move anytime soon. He was relaxed, too relaxed. Move, Kisame. The command was spoken softly, but it still carried power and urgency. Kisame heard it and was barely able to move in time, for Naruto glowed and exploded with a bang, blasting the walls and any area near him. Meanwhile, Naruto heard the bang and smirked from his position outside the window of the corridor. The explosion was something he hadn't taken into account, but it wasn't a bad thing either. The clone's job was only to distract the newcomers, but this works as well. A good thing the entire floor was empty. He would go through the memories later. Itachi and Kisame stared at the spot where the clone used to be. Exploding cage Bunshin, Itachi whispered in the slightest wonder. It looks like Naruto was smarter than he previously thought, and very perceptive too. He had known the danger of them and had a shadow clone answer in his place. They had been talking to a shadow clone all this time. Kisame gave a grunt of irritation as he looked at his slightly burnt hand. It had been way too close. Looks like the Jinchuriki is going to be more trouble than we thought, he muttered as he healed the burn with his chakra. Itachi, on the other hand, was thinking what this could mean. Naruto was obviously not here. He was out and had left a shadow clone in his place to keep guard. That, or Naruto had somehow known they were here and had gone to call Jiraiya. But they both jumped a bit sideways, letting the bolt of red lightning pass in between them and collapse while on the end of the corridor to splinters. Itachi and Kisame turned their heads to see the real Naruto standing behind them, right hand extended and the other holding a kunai. Naruto smirked at the looks on their faces, more like the look on Kisame's face. Itachi was as blank as empty paper. Kisame was baring his sharp teeth in annoyance. I can't believe you fell for that. Apparently, Kisame did not like the mock at all. So one second he was standing beside Itachi, the other he was right in Naruto's personal space, sword ready to cut him. The power behind the strike was enough to shatter a piece of the wall behind him, and would have sliced Naruto in half. Keywords. Would have. Kisame did not know of the danger sense Naruto possessed, nor of the slower perception it granted Naruto. The danger sense rang loudly, and the world had slowed down for Naruto as soon as Kisame had taken the step towards him. Naruto had watched in slow motion as Kisame flew towards him. He would have to give credit to the guy, for he was almost as fast as Kakashi, with the blade. So he was right in front of Naruto in only a second. Oh, and neither Itachi nor Kisame knew of the marking Naruto had put on the other end of the corridor as a safety precaution. Kisame shattered part of the wall in front of him with Samahata. He had intended to cut off the legs of the brat so he couldn't run anymore. But to his shock, he wasn't even standing in front of him anymore. Over here, Slowpoke. Kisame whirled around to see Naruto nonchalantly leaning against the wall on the opposite end of the corridor. Even Itachi couldn't conceal his surprise as his eyes were wide as well. Kisame's wide eyes reflected his thoughts clearly. How did he move so fast? I didn't even see him moving. Itachi's thoughts were a bit more sophisticated than his partner's. While it was a bit much to cut off Naruto's legs, it would certainly make their job easier. He had thought that Kisame had gotten Naruto with that strike, but he had dodged it. Not only that, but it looked like he barely put any effort into it. Even with his Sharingan, he hadn't been able to track Naruto's movement, and that was speaking something since his Sharingan was of the highest evolution. That was the speed Naruto had so nonchalantly pulled off. All he had seen was a tiny, almost unnoticeable flash of neon blue. It was almost like he had teleported. Itachi's train of thought was brought to a sudden stop. Surely not, he couldn't have mastered that jutsu, there's no way. Kisame slowly walked back to where Itachi was standing, his face cleared of the shock from earlier. He could see from the look on Itachi's face that even he hadn't seen the boy move. He slowly grinned in excitement, this might be a challenge after all. It's been a long time, Sasuke. XXXXXXX Naruto may acted playful on the outside, but inside he was all serious. That sword, he had felt as if it wasn't just taking his life. There was some sort of pull in that sword, but Naruto had flashed away before it could make contact. Seemingly, it could take chakra of its opponents. Also, Jiraiya should have reached here by now. He had caused 2 explosions enough for Jiraiya to come here as fast as he could. He had activated his sensing, and he was sensing Jiraiya closing in fast. However, he sensed another person that caused a pit to form in his stomach. Why the hell was he here? It's been a long time, Sasuke. Naruto watched with narrowed eyes and a small hint of annoyance as he noticed Sasuke standing behind the 2 missing nin. Kisame turned around to glance at the newcomer as well. Who? Sasuke represented the classic picture of a guy wanting revenge. Form straight, legs spread slightly apart, hands at the side and hair shadowing the front of his face. When he glanced up, Naruto could see it. The Sharingan was blazing, and the burning hate in those eyes was unmistakable. Uchiha Itachi. Sasuke was trembling in rage as he gazed at his older brother. When he had found out that his brother was in the village courtesy of a loose-lipped Jonin looking for Naruto of all people, his blood had nearly turned to ice. He knew Naruto was strong, very strong for his age. Strong enough that he had been promoted straight to Jonin. But his brother was in another league entirely. No matter how powerful Naruto was now, Itachi would utterly destroy him. He had immediately set off in pursuit of his teammate. It was fortunate that the old man at Ichiraku was kind enough to tell him that Naruto had left the village with Jiraiya, the Toad Sage and one of the legendary Sannin. That popped a question in Sasuke's head as to just what was Naruto doing traveling with one of the most powerful shinobi in the world. Nevertheless, he had ruthlessly pushed the question at the back of his head. Concern for his teammate had overridden his logic, not to mention the rage smoldering inside him at the piece of news that Itachi came for Naruto and not him. He had immediately run off to the closest town, counting on the fact that they could not have gotten far if they had only set off 2 hours earlier. It had taken him only half an hour of running close to full speed to arrive at the nearest town. He had then stopped for a quick breather for 5 minutes, before resuming his search for Jiraiya and Naruto. After 15 minutes, he was ready to pull his hair out when suddenly, a loud explosion sounded not far away from where he was. He had turned to see one of the inn's upper floors exploding outwards. It had been fleeting, but he was able to catch the distinct red lightning that Naruto used. He had immediately rushed over there. He wasn't disappointed at the sight that met his eyes. Naruto was certainly there, confidently leaning against the wall and facing 2 people whose backs were facing him. One was a ridiculously tall man, holding a large, bandaged sword that reminded Sasuke of Zabuza's sword. The other one though. It has been a long time, Sasuke. Sasuke's blood boiled at the painfully familiar voice. The same voice that he had loved hearing, and the same voice that had advised him to hate him to gain power to kill him one day. The same voice that slaughtered his parents, his entire clan without an ounce of mercy. Uchiha Itachi. His vision went red as rage started to cloud his mind. This was the day he had been waiting for so long. The day he would finally kill Itachi and avenge his clan. Naruto could see that rage was beginning to cloud Sasuke, as any and all sense of rationality seemed to leave him as soon as he caught sight of Itachi. He frowned. There was no way Sasuke was ready to take on Itachi, AS class missing nin at his current power. Even Naruto knew that he would only last 1 or 2 minutes, after which the ex-Anbu captain would finish him off, flying thunder god or not. Sasuke, Control yourself. You cannot beat him. Even Naruto knew that it was the wrong thing to say, but frankly, he had nothing else to say that could stop Sasuke at this point. He could only hope Sasuke would regain some of his rationality. Stay out of this, Naruto. Okay, maybe not. He watched with wide eyes what happened next. Sasuke screamed in utter fury rage unlike anything Naruto had ever seen before. It was as if Sasuke was screaming his soul out, willing that Itachi burst into flames on the very spot. He watched in befuddlement as Sasuke burst in a sprint towards Itachi, and the latter's complete lack of caring that his brother was running at him with lightning aimed at his heart. Naruto slowly fell into a loose stance as Itachi just grabbed Sasuke's wrist seemingly without even trying, and redirected Chidori's power towards the side, causing the third explosion in the hallway. Sasuke struggled to get out of Itachi's hold as the power of his jutsu died out. Naruto weighed his options. He couldn't use a jutsu, for there was a very low chance that he wouldn't hit Sasuke. Oh well, no one ever said everything could be solved with jutsus. 8 shuriken went sailing across the air, approaching the enemy shinobi with deadly accuracy. Kisame just snorted and used his large sword to simply bat the shuriken away. Itachi glanced at Naruto for the attack, and Sasuke took this chance to once more attack his brother. Why you're annoying. The statement was said so dismissively that Naruto felt that Itachi was simply dealing with an annoying housefly, not a person hellbent on killing him. Also, following the statement, was the clean, snapping sound of Sasuke's wrist breaking. Naruto sighed in annoyance as Sasuke screamed in pain and bent over, clutching his broken wrist. This really might set back all the progress he had made with the Lord of Emo. Kisame suddenly ran forward, intending to land another strike on Naruto. Naruto brought his kunai up, ready to dodge or block. Before he could do either of them, smoke burst in front of him as a toad appeared, blocking the sword with a forelimb guard. Naruto did not drop his guard as he spoke to his savior. You sure took your sweet time coming here, sensei. Jiraiya arrived on the scene from the window on Naruto's end of the corridor, one leg propped up on the sill while the other was flat on the ground, carrying the body of an unconscious woman. The same woman that Naruto had seen earlier. He muttered in annoyance, you couldn't have left her in the room or something. Jiraiya clearly heard this, but ignored it as he set the girl down and walked up to stand beside Naruto. Don't be like that, Naruto. My timing was perfect. Turning to the 2 missing nin, he pointed his finger at them. Nice try, but a distraction like that could never work on me. It did though, didn't it? Naruto whispered to the older man, only to receive a harsh nudge to his ribs. He wisely backed off, opting to let Jiraiya handle this. However, he was surprised when Jiraiya was about to engage the two. Sasuke got up and snarled. Itachi is mine. He shot forward to try and catch his brother off guard. Of course, like the time before that, his ass was handed right back to him. Naruto watched with an impassive face as Sasuke was abused like nobody's business, with Itachi not holding back on him at all. Kisame saw this and grinned. You don't seem to be too concerned about your teammate, Naruto-san. Naruto had to bite back the instinctual response of that it was Sasuke's own stupidity that he was being beaten like that. Did he really think he was as strong as a Sannin, who were among the only few people in the world who could match Itachi? Instead, he replied, oh, I'm concerned all right. It's just that I don't wear my heart on my sleeve like that impulsive moron. Sasuke grunted in pain as Itachi ruthlessly punished him. He could feel that his ribs were at least cracked, if not broken. His stomach felt like it was being crushed with each strike to it, and he was starting to see 3 Itachis. He couldn't even cry out in pain as Itachi held him up against the wall by his throat. What is this difference? The gap between us is as large as ever. What the hell have I been doing all this while? Foolish little brother. Itachi's voice might have been a monotone and uncaring, but there was no mistaking that he scorned Sasuke in the moment. You still don't have enough hate. You are pathetically weak. Perhaps you need something to refresh your purpose in life. Naruto watched with a considerable amount of concern as Sasuke suddenly started screaming like there was no tomorrow. Kisame only chuckled without any sort of mercy. As cruel as always. It seems he used Tsukuyomi on his little brother. Naruto was just about to act when suddenly, Jiraiya raced through a series of hand signs beside him, slamming his hands onto the ground. Naruto watched in wonder as the entire hallway transformed, No, got covered in some sort of a fleshy substance. He watched as the flesh wrapped over Kisami's feet, causing the giant man to curse. Jiraiya smirked. Kuchios. Gamaguchi Shibari. You two will made good food for the giant, fire-breathing rock frog. As he said it, fleshy tendrils erupted from the flesh and moved towards the cloaked nin to ensnare them. Naruto whistled in appreciation at the offensive and defensive power of the technique. It was not only capable of attacking whatever was inside it, but protecting as well, evident from the way Sasuke got swallowed behind a wall of flesh. Neither of them saw Itachi close his eyes, but both of them felt the explosion that rocked the hallway. The fourth one today, Naruto absently noted as he ran around the corner with Jiraiya, eyes going wide in surprise. Jiraiya cursed in shock somehow. They were able to burn a hole through the organ of a frog that breathes fire, he realized. Fascinating, Naruto muttered as he observed the black flames, keeping a safe distance. He had never seen black flames before in his life. As far as he knew, white flames were the hottest, followed by the blue one and the yellow flame. Another interesting thing he observed was that unlike regular fire, this one kept on burning without showing any sign of getting extinguished. He suddenly remembered that he had teammate who was attacked by a S-rank missing nin. He turned and headed to the spot where Sasuke was buried in the guts, leaving Jiraiya to seal the flames in a scroll. After sealing the black fire, he cancelled the frog mouth jutsu with a heaving sigh. He returned to where Naruto was sitting before the Uchiha, seemingly examining him. The aforementioned Uchiha was pale, giving an absent look to the wall in front of him. It was as if he was asleep and conscious at the same time. Wow, he really didn't hold back on you at all, it seems, Naruto muttered in slight concern as his hands lightly brushed over Sasuke's chest area. The flinch told him all he needed to know. He lifted Sasuke's shirt, observing the impressive bruises forming on the boy's stomach and ribs. If what he heard was correct. Take small breaths. You don't want to aggravate your possibly broken ribs, Naruto advised him as he closely observed the pupils in Sasuke's eyes. With a sigh, he stood up. Okay, this is how it. He was suddenly cut off when a kunai blazed past him, lodging itself into the wall. He watched in amusement as Jiraiya's face met a blue ninja sandal, the following body screaming out, dynamic entry. Jiraiya flew with the kick, crashing into the opposite wall all the way down the hallway. Naruto shook his head with a resigned look. Wasn't he the one who preached how a shinobi should always mind his surroundings? Damn it, guy, what's wrong with you? Jiraiya growled out, rubbing his face to try and take away the sting. Guy wilted a little, bowing apologetically to Jiraiya. My apologies, Jiraiya-sama. Guy shouted. Naruto reflected absently that all the man ever did was shouted. I had come to retrieve Sasuke-kun, but it seems I mistook you for an enemy ninja. Here he looked sheepish, rubbing the back of his head and sweating slightly under Jiraiya's glare. Whatever. You came here to take the Uchiha, right? Get the kid and go already, he needs to get that wrist looked at. Jiraiya said with a wave of his hand. Not just the wrist, Naruto said as he stood up. He needs immediate medical attention for his cracked, possibly broken ribs, bruised stomach with possible internal bleeding, psychological damage and first-degree concussion, in addition to the broken wrist, the last part was said while glaring at Jiraiya. Jiraiya looked incredulously at Naruto along with Guy. How can you possibly know about all of that? Naruto sighed and gave a look of boredom, it's really not that hard. If you paid close attention to the beating he was getting, you would see it too. The broken wrist is obvious, the heavy bruises around his stomach area usually account for internal bleeding, but you never can be sure until proper examination. The cracked ribs are also obvious, I heard it. Don't know about them being broken though. Psychological damage is from the eye technique that Itachi seemingly used on Sasuke, for he suddenly started screaming, followed by transition into a semi-conscious state. The concussion is also obvious as well, for if you take a look at his pupils, one pupil is dilated a bit more than the other. Jiraiya and Guy gaped at the thorough diagnosis. While not on a level of medic nin, Naruto's diagnosis was quite logical, now that Jiraiya thought about it. The way that Naruto said everything was obvious told a lot about the way Naruto was used to looking at life. Logical conclusion derived purely from observation. The kid was pretty damn good. He would make a pretty good spy master, if not for his dream of being Hokage. I think I should see to it that Sasuke-kun receives medical attention as soon as possible, Guy said as he tenderly picked Sasuke up. Moments like these geniuses spouting off something made him feel a bit awkward and inadequate. He then raced off, shouting off, springtime, and youth. Naruto and Jiraiya sweat dropped at the man's excessive behaviors, before shrugging it off. Every ninja had their quirks, Guy was just a bit more unique than the others. So, you know why those guys were after me? Not you, more like what's inside you, Jiraiya answered. Naruto put a hand on his stomach, where Kurama's seal was. Why? At this point, I don't know. All that matters is, anyone who wants the power of Biju that isn't a Jinchuriki isn't up to any good, Jiraiya explained, sighing heavily. Looks like we'll have to be careful around those guys, don't we, Kurama? Indeed. We can never be too careful, even if your seal is one of the strongest in existence, Kurama replied. Naruto patted his stomach. I doubt anyone has the key to open this seal. Turning to Jiraiya, he said, we should leave, don't you think? A nod, and they both gathered their belongings, after which Jiraiya shunshined them right outside the town. They resumed their walking in silence, each thinking about what happened back there. Jiraiya tried to think about what the Akatsuki would need all the Biju for, while Naruto thought about a possible addition to his Hiraishin. Namely, how he could summon anything that was marked by him. So, what does your teammate look like? The question snapped Jiraiya out of his thoughts as he looked over to the blonde beside him. Seeing his questioning look, Naruto elaborated, if she's your teammate, she obviously must be pretty old, right? Jiraiya snorted in agreement. Well, Tsunade's pretty vain, you see. She's addicted to gambling, but her luck is so bad that she is known as the legendary sucker. On top of that, she has a habit of taking money from moneylenders and never returning it. So she's almost always on the run. He rummaged in his vest for a picture of what she looked like now while Naruto shook his head in mild disgust. She sounds like a kleptomaniac and a coward. Jiraiya paused in his search to give a harsh glare. Watch it. This time, Naruto didn't back down as he glared back. Why? Is the truth so hard to hear? A kleptomaniac is a person who cannot help but steal for personal use or financial gain. Seeing as she steals money only to gamble it away, she certainly classifies as one. And she's a goddamn coward because she is always running away from her problems, instead of facing them. In the words of her grandfather, the Shodai Hokage, a shinobi is the one who endures. What you have told me, she is a disgrace to the title of shinobi, let alone Hokage. His danger sense rang true as he ducked beneath the punch that would have broken his jaw, and caught the left roundhouse to his right temple. He matched the glare of his godfather in ferocity. Reality is hard to accept, isn't it? Naruto could feel the waves of malice coming from Jiraiya. They both were locked in a glaring match until Jiraiya dropped the glare and sighed heavily. He started walking again, with Naruto following behind him shortly. Silence rang for a few minutes, until Naruto broke it. I won't apologize for speaking out the truth. I wasn't going to ask you to. The reply made him look at the older man in surprise, and for the first time, Naruto saw sadness on the usually jovial man's face. Everything you said is true, in a way. I knew it long before you said it, I just didn't want to say it out loud, he shrugged, but can you blame me? I am biased for I am her former teammate. He smirked softly, your pragmatism astounds me, Naruto. Then again, given the way you have lived, I should have expected that. Naruto shrugged, putting his hands in his pocket. I had no other option but to face whatever was in front of me. There was simply no way I was going to give up on a dream that I knew I could accomplish. Jiraiya nodded as he finally found the picture. Here's your answer to your earlier question. Naruto took the picture and felt his eyes bulge out. Holy shit. There's no way she's above 50 and this hot. He gaped at the picture, dragging his eyes back to Jiraiya's knowing smirk. This has to be a genjutsu, right? Jiraiya nodded. Permanent one, I have to point out. She is on run, after all. Naruto handed the picture back. So, where do you think she is? I don't know. The response earned him a look of deadpan from his godson. Feeling stupid, he hurriedly explained, we have to go to the next town to pick up more information. After that, I'll give you the training I promised to you. Naruto folded his arms, can I start the jutsu training at least? Jiraiya thought about it. The jutsu did have 3 steps to be completed and none of them were easy. He supposed it wouldn't be too bad to give Naruto a head start. Fine. He then took out the water balloons from his backpack. We're going to use these. Naruto gave a wary look to the man. You're not making fun of me, right? This is a real jutsu. Jiraiya bonked him on the head. Baka. The real jutsu comes after you master the basics. Now watch closely. Naruto carefully observed what Jiraiya was doing, his senses active. But he didn't sense anything, at least not in the beginning. His eyes narrowed as the balloon was poked outwards in several directions at the same time, making it burst in the man's hand. Jiraiya smirked at the thoughtful look on his apprentice's face. No doubt, he was trying to figure out what happened. Now you try it. He tossed a water balloon to Naruto, who held it thoughtfully. The next 15 minutes were very peaceful for Jiraiya as he began thinking on how to convince Tsunade to return to Konoha, willingly, without blackmail. A bit harder than it sounded, but he was confident he would find a way. After all, he had insurance in the name of Uzumaki Naruto, who got it. The words so nonchalantly spoken brought Jiraiya out of his thoughts. Wide-eyed, he turned to see Naruto still holding the balloon, intact. His face quickly gave way to annoyance. How exactly have you got it? Naruto looked up from the balloon to say the annoyed face. What? I said I got how you popped the balloon. Not that I have popped it already. Jiraiya folded his arms. Tell me. Naruto shrugged, if you insist. You rotated the chakra in your palm in multiple directions. The high number of rotations of water happening at the same time increased the pressure inside the balloon to the point it becomes too much and it pops. Jiraiya simply stared at Naruto in disbelief. In only 15 minutes, this boy had figured out the first step of the jutsu and explained it as if he was answering a question in a class. But the theory by itself isn't enough. Alright, your theory is correct. But will you be able to apply it, now that you know it? Naruto smirked. Nothing is impossible, Ero Sennin. I haven't told you yet, but I don't have a chakra network. Which means, I have a direct control on my chakra instead of controlling it through chakra coils. Whatever you can do, I can do better. The water started swirling in multiple directions, just like Jiraiya's, in the balloon until it finally popped after 5 seconds. Naruto held out a hand to a gaping Jiraiya. Can I have some more? He spent the next hour popping water balloons with the other hand and sometimes, both hands. It was fun, and it kept him entertained. Not to mention, it was good training. After popping the balloon, he focused on how quickly he could pop them. He managed to get the time down to 1 second, making him grin. He finally looked at Jiraiya. What's next? Turns out, it was a rubber ball. And, it was definitely harder to pop than the water balloon, considering there was only air inside and the rubber shell was thicker than a balloon. The theory of the first step certainly didn't work for the second step, and Naruto carefully kept his face free of emotions, for he absolutely refused to give the smirking sage the satisfaction of knowing just how frustrated he was. His genius was baffled to a previously unreached degree. They passed and stopped in several towns over the course of the next few days. One time, Jiraiya tried to con him for his money so he could visit a brothel. Flashback. Naruto and Jiraiya smiled as they looked over the bustling crowd in the marketplace. Looks like a festival is going on, doesn't it? It's a pretty famous one, if I remember correctly. Naruto stretched and bounced the rubber ball in his hands. He still hadn't popped it, to his immense frustration. Then would you mind if I look around a bit? Jiraiya waved his hand. Go on, kid. Naruto smiled and took out his wallet. He long suspected that the frog wallet was given to him by Jiraiya, but he figured the man would get flustered if he called him out on it. The wallet was full of money, and Jiraiya was quick to spot it. Oh, it looks like you are rich. Naruto internally smirked. The man had no idea just how rich he was, without counting the inheritance from both of his clans. However, he watched in bewilderment as the wallet suddenly disappeared from his hands. He gave a quizzical look to Jiraiya, who put the wallet in his robes. What the hell, Ero Sennin? Don't worry, Naruto. I'll watch over it for you. After all, you're just looking around, aren't you? See you at the village gates in the evening, and take care of my stuff while you're at it. Naruto caught the bag and watched curiously as the man strutted away. He smirked as the slung the bag on and took out his real one. I wonder how long it takes for him to realize there is just paper money in there. Flashback end. Turns out, Jiraiya didn't find out until he had finished his time at the brothel. When it came to pay, it was then he realized that the money he was holding wasn't real money, just paper. He had to be from his own pocket, to his immense regret. Naruto watched in amusement as Jiraiya proceeded to glare at him for the next 3 days. He never took his wallet again, though. However, it was during his usual bar rounds on which he was finally able to pin Tsunade down. Turns out, that Tanzaku town is having a big festival. The town was already a tourist place with its hot springs, theaters and not to mention casinos. So it confused Naruto that they started moving even slower than before. Shouldn't we hurry up and catch her in Tanzaku before she gets away? Jiraiya grinned at Naruto. If we do that, she would know for sure that we're there for her and she'll bolt. We can't spook her just yet, so we'll get there a couple days after her and make it look like we just happened to run into each other. See? Naruto shook his head. No, but I'm sure I will in some time. Putting Tsunade aside, how's the rubber ball coming? It's been 19 days. Naruto released a breath. I have a question for you instead. Jiraiya frowned. Okay, shoot. What? Just what am I supposed to ultimately achieve? Jiraiya chuckled with a grin. I was wondering when you'd ask that. Come on, let's go over to that tree over there. He led Naruto to over a sizable tree on the side of the road. Watch my hand, alright. He requested, left hand held up. Naruto watched, amazed, as the chakra swirled and thickened, forming a swirling, spiraling sphere. He could feel the slightest sensation of wind coming from the spinning, visible ball of chakra. Jiraiya's hand reared back and then with great force, he thrust it into the tree's trunk. Naruto was disappointed to see that when the jutsu dispelled, there was only a small, but deep gash in the tree trunk. That's it. Jiraiya, as if he had read his thoughts, smirked and pointed to the tree. Look behind it. Naruto moved around to view the back of the tree and whistled at the sight. The back of the tree had completely exploded outwards. It is a wonder the tree was still standing. Okay, that is impressive. He tapped the bark of the tree lightly, and watched with eyebrows raised as the tree completely fell. He turned to Jiraiya in excitement. Who made it? The wickedly grinning sage said, your father, of course. Naruto smiled softly in pride, still admiring the aftereffects of the jutsu. To-san, huh. I guess I shouldn't be amazed. To-san was pretty amazing after all. Pretty amazing doesn't even cover it. But it took him almost 3 years to create this. I wonder how long will it take you to master this? Jiraiya challenged. Naruto smirked. Now that I know what to do now, no time at all. With that, he went at the ball with renewed vigor. 1 hour later, he popped the ball. He finally figured out the trick behind the second step. The second step involved power. He had to concentrate the volume and density of his chakra inside the ball, increase the pressure so much that the ball burst. It took him a fair amount of concentration to do it, but once he had the gist of how he had to do it, he began popping the remaining balls just like water balloons with the other hand and with both hands together. The result was that his hands started trembling uncontrollably from the overuse of chakra. Naruto had almost panicked had Jiraiya not explained it to him that he probably hadn't used his chakra from his hands before in this way, so it was a process of getting used to it. He had to grow past the pain threshold if he was to perfectly use the Rasengan. The next day, they arrived in Tanzaku town. Jiraiya told him that he would explain the third and the last step of the jutsu once they were in their hotel room. For the present, they were just enjoying the sights, when Naruto suddenly asked an unusual question. Ero Sennin, how good are you at gambling? Jiraiya blinked at the random query, but answered nonetheless, I'm not particularly bad at it, if that's what you are asking. Naruto nodded. Good. Then, he was cut off when people suddenly started running in the opposite direction of where they were facing. He muttered with narrowed eyes as he sensed a high influx of chakra. What the hell? Jiraiya suddenly took off, forcing Naruto to follow him. Naruto followed as well, both heading towards the massive source of chakra, to the castle on top of a hill. Arriving there, they gaped at the level of destruction. Walls were crumbled to dust and debris, holes and gashes in the ground leading the two to believe either someone was murdered or there was a massive battle. Looks like our snake friend met up with Tsunade, Jiraiya surmised, looking around the scene. Orochimaru. Naruto muttered, looking around for some sort of clue. It seemed reasonable as he had burnt off his arms. Why he didn't just sprout another body from his mouth instead of looking for Tsunade was beyond Naruto. Let's give her some time to cool off. Naruto, the third step to the Rasengan is combining the first two. See you around. And then he was gone in a swirl of leaves. Naruto glared at the spot, before sighing. I guess I should have expected that. XXXXXXX, Orochimaru-sama, I still don't understand why we came here to talk to Tsunade. You could have simply sprouted a new body to heal them. Kabuto commented as he sat by his master. Orochimaru smiled with a wicked glint in his eyes as he looked down at his completely burnt hands. It was only because of high tolerance of pain he had built over the years that he wasn't screaming. There are many things you have yet to learn, Kabuto. I did not shred my skin because Tsunade has a jutsu that I need. A jutsu. Golden slitted eyes twinkled dangerously, yes. One that can heal any injury. One that has the potential to bring back people from the dead. XXXXXXX Naruto spent the rest of the day until evening in their hotel room, trying to combine the two steps. He made a startling and a very pleasant discovery that it was not very difficult like the previous step. Here he was now, panting lightly as he gazed with pride at the ball of spinning chakra between his hands. He had done it. He had actually done it. He could feel the power in the Rasengan, and it was enough to destroy someone's guts in a matter of seconds. He released the hold on his chakra, causing the Rasengan to dissipate. He leaned back against the tree, feeling a great sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. It had taken him a total of 20 days to learn his father's most prized jutsu. Finally. Now I can begin to master it. He breathed out. He frowned as he thought of his father. The man was legendary, known for his speed and Rasengan. It must take him only an instant to form it, with one hand. Right, Naruto needed 10 seconds and both hands to form it. Man, this is going to take a while. He trained for another hour, and managed to bring the time down to 3 seconds. A big improvement, but still done with 2 hands. He figured that if he learned to instantly form it with 2 hands, doing it with 1 hand might become easier. Of course, at one point, the idea of using shadow clones to hasten the process had come to mind, but was immediately discarded. His father had taken 3 years to create the jutsu and master it all by himself. It would be cheap and insulting his memory if he used an easy way out. He was about to try again when he heard the voice. That was very good, Naruto. Naruto looked up to see Jiraiya sitting on the windowsill, grinning. He smirked, thanks. Took me the whole day to get to where I am. Jiraiya came in and ruffled his hair. You managed to master the Rasengan in 20 days. This is ridiculous and all kinds of absurd. Even I took 7 months to learn it. You really are a genius, kid. Naruto frowned and shook his head. Learn, not master, Arrow Sennin. Master is when I am able to form it with 1 hand in an instant, he emphasized by snapping his fingers. Jiraiya stared at him and asked, you are a perfectionist when it comes to jutsu, aren't you? Naruto shrugged and got up. I have to make sure I don't waste chakra while using it. He put on his jacket and zipped it up. While tying his sash around his forehead, he turned to a bewildered Jiraiya. What are you doing? Naruto paused momentarily. I think we've given enough time for Tsunade to cool down, haven't we? Jiraiya's expression turned into one that told Naruto he had actually forgotten what they came here to do. Yeah, let's go. And that's the end of it. Sorry about the weak reason for Orochimaru, I didn't think up far enough. Here's something to make up for it. Omake Naruto and Jiraiya entered the gambling den. According to Jiraiya, this is where they would find the most information concerning Tsunade's whereabouts. They would start early next morning, make the 2-hour walk to Tanzaku. Jiraiya made his way towards a gambler with Naruto following, holding a rubber ball. Even though he had popped the ball hours earlier, it was fun to play with. At least his hands had something to do. Jiraiya held up a picture of Tsunade, the same one he had shown to Naruto. Have you seen this woman? The gambler, one with an afro style of hair, looked at the photo closely before making a sound of realization. I have indeed. She said she was heading there to win back her losses. Jiraiya made a perplexed face. What do you mean, there? The gambler smirked. Tell you what, why don't we trade? If you win, I'll tell you where she is for free. If I win, you'll have to pay a 1,000 ryo for the info. What do you say? Naruto had a bad feeling about this, but he couldn't say the same for Jiraiya. Alright. Jiraiya sat down, apparently about to enjoy the little gamble he just walked into. Naruto rolled the rubber ball in his hand thoughtfully. The gambler wasn't suffering any loss by giving them the information. They were the ones looking for Tsunade, not him. On the other hand, they would lose a 1000 ryo if Jiraiya lost. Either way, it was the gambler's victory. He would have to be vigilant. The gambler shook the opaque glass with the dice in it and slammed it down, bottoms up. Choose. Cho, or Han. Jiraiya made a thoughtful sound as he gazed at the glass. After a moment of thinking, he smirked and slammed his hand on the floor. Cho. The gambler smirked in return. If it's Han, it's my victory. Naruto activated his danger sense, the perception slowing down for him. He peeked at the dice the moment the glass was lifted. And lo, his instincts ran true. Jiraiya was about to lose a 1000 ryo. Chakra swirled inside the rubber ball in the span of an instant. Naruto purposely overloaded it, for instead of the normal pop, it exploded with air that was compressed in high amounts. It easily knocked over the gambler in front of them and the other one in the room, who was playing with some other guy. Jiraiya seemed to not notice it at all, for he was mournfully muttering. A 1000 ryo. Naruto nudged his master, nodding the man to look at the dice. Jiraiya blinked when he saw that the dice had suddenly changed from Han to Cho, which meant he won. The gambler got up and groaned. What the hell was that? Oh damn, Naruto mock scowled while gazing at his hand, looks like I used too much power again. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at that. He knew Naruto had perfectly popped the ball over 20 times, so he shouldn't be making any mistakes now. Unless. He smirked when he realized what had happened. Naruto had deliberately overloaded the ball, causing it to explode rather than pop. He saw Naruto giving him a discreet wink. Turning to the gambler, he said with no small amount of smugness, looks like I win. Grumbling, the gambler had no choice but to give them the information. As they were about to leave, Naruto nudged Jiraiya. Hey, can I try that too? Jiraiya blinked. You want to try gambling? Naruto nodded resolutely. Yeah. Jiraiya smirked. Then go ahead. We can wait for another hour. Let's see how much money you can make or lose. Naruto grinned happily as he sat down before an empty dealer. Deal me in. Jiraiya's smirk was soon lost when Naruto bet the double amount of what the gambler had demanded from him. He tried to warn him, Naruto, that's too much. He received no reply as Naruto engaged the dealer in a game of high card. And he won. 5 times in a row. Jiraiya and everyone else in the room were now gaping at Naruto, who was happily counting the 20,000 ryo he just made. With each victory, he increased the bet until the last one. The dealer was literally in tears from losing so much. Naruto put the money in his backpack and got up, bowing respectfully. Thank you for the game. Jiraiya was grinning like a fool as he slung his arm around Naruto, who knew you had your mother's luck in gambling, Naruto. Naruto blinked up at him. Not my dad's. Jiraiya replied, for all his smarts, your dad sucked at gambling. Wait. The two shinobi halted, turning around to see the same gambler who had played with Jiraiya. He was holding up 2 dices while smirking. How about a last game before you go? Naruto and Jiraiya looked at each other, then looked back, both of them smirking. Naruto challenged, haven't you lost enough for one day? The gambler kept on smirking, I intend to win it all back, with interest. Now both of them could have easily declined and walked away, but Naruto whispered to Jiraiya, he seems quite confident that he could win. Could it be that he would use faulty dice? Jiraiya whispered back, there's a solution to that as well. Out loud, he said, fine. One last game before we go. Naruto walked over to the gambler sitting down in front of him. He noticed that the others were also standing around them, watching closely. He mentally cursed his chances of cheating just went down drastically, with all the attention that was upon them. So, shall we begin? Wait. Both Naruto and the gambler looked over to Jiraiya, who was holding up a pair of dice of his own. Do you mind using this one instead of yours? The gambler scoffed, if this is your attempt at cheating, then it's beyond pathetic, old man. Jiraiya was not offended at all, it's not that, actually. There's a chance that you might be cheating with your dice, but there's also a chance that we might be cheating as well. Naruto had to give credit to the guy, he gave no outward sign to the statement of lying. So how about we use the dice of a neutral party, huh? The gambler asked, whose dice is that, old man? Jiraiya nodded to the other gambler, his. The other gambler's eyes widened as he whipped over to look at his table. His dice wasn't there. The old man must have picked it up, he realized. Looking back, he gulped and nodded at the other gambler. The gambler lazily turned towards the two, but he was mentally cursing on losing his chance at using his other dice. His dice always assured him of his victory. If he denied now, he might get caught. He had no choice but to agree. Fine. Naruto asked, what's the bet? The gambler smirked, if you lose, you return all the money that you won from us. Naruto smirked back, what happened to interest? It looked like his theory was right after all. He was prepared to cheat his way out. The gambler smoothly returned, I suppose I can waive that. After all, you guys have been most entertaining. And if you lose, you will give me double the amount. The crowd around them broke into excited whispers at that. Jiraiya had to hand it to Naruto. The kid had balls of steel, that was for sure. The gambler gulped, don't you think that's taking it to a bit too far? Naruto shrugged and made a motion to get up, you were the one who wants to play. That's my bet, take it or leave it. The gambler considered this heavily. On one hand, he could go the safe road and leave it, saving the gambling house a potential loss of 40,000 ryo. If this kid won, they would go bankrupt and be the laughingstock of the town. If he won, they would be back in normal business. Ultimately, lure of the risk of gambling won out. He took the dice from Jiraiya and rolled it in his glass, slamming it on the ground. Choose. Cho, or Han. Naruto did not even look at the glass, staring the gambler right in the eyes. Han. The crowd leaned over each other, almost falling over in the process to see what the result was. Jiraiya and Naruto leaned over in anticipation as well. XXXXXXX, how can you be grinning? Naruto grinned as he comfortably laid on the bed. Because I won. Jiraiya snorted, you single-handedly put them out of business, brat. How can you even sleep after? Tonight. Naruto closed his eyes, like a baby, old man. You better not let Tsunade know of your insane luck. She won't let you leave her side when she goes gambling. Naruto snorted in amusement, I don't intend to.